This is where Yakety Sack starts one.
Yeah, right, good morning everybody and welcome to the General Committee meeting. I declare the meeting open. We begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on whose land we meet and pay our respects to their owners past, present and emerging. Mr CEO, do we have any apologies?
Yes, we have an apology from the Council of Untitled today. Unfortunately, she's dealing with personal and family matter.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. Do we have any presentations,
No,
deputations?
none today.
Okay. First item referred from the Planning and Environment Committee is the MCU 190117 development application for a material change of use for visitor accommodation type 3 at 500/90 Beach Road North Shore. This is the wave pool application, and Kerry, some more info.
Might be a declaration first.
Oh, beg your pardon.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's it.
There is a declaration.
Okay, I declare a perceived conflict of interest in this matter as defined in section 175D of the Local Government Act due to my personal relationship with the applicant Mark Bain of Tea Tree Property Proprietary Limited and the Bain family, who are family friends that have attended social events together and whose children both attended school together and served together as part of the NOOSA Board Riders Club. During the election, I had an election sign at Gympie Terrace petrol station with the approval of the business owner and Mark Bain, who was the landlord of the property. I believe wholeheartedly that I could consider this item impartially and in the public interest and request to remain in the room to participate in the debate and vote on this matter.
Okay. I just have a question, probably for Councillor Lawrence. Did Mr. Bain also appear in a video that was circulated during the election campaign? Did he lend his support to an election campaign video?
I think the best way to answer that, Frank, is to explain what happened.
Sure.
So we were my children and his children, and that's how the association is formed. We're friends by virtue of the relationship of our kids who went to school together at St Andrews. I was at a surf comp, the same as I was this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, state surfing comp, and I had just put my hand up to run. I decided then, I think it was 6 months before the election, that I was going to have a go at this and run for council. At the time at the event, there was another friend, I use the word friend, association, who works for Panga Productions. And she said to me I should do a video. So I took the opportunity. There was people from the NOOSA Board Riders Club, parents from St Andrews, all whose kids surf and were competing at this comp. I asked them if they could answer some questions in relation to divisional boundaries. At no stage was I asking for them to vote for me, and I think everyone in this room and everyone in this community would also remember that I stood very proud on my platform of independence, to the point where I took zero financial assistance from everyone. I was 100% self-funded, and my mantra was I had no IOUs. I was not related to any real estate agent. I was not friends, or I wasn't part of a development group. That I stood for community and was voted because people that know me know that I wouldn't compromise my integrity, my reputation by betraying community trust. I think that's a known. And okay.
That was my question. Have you received financial support from Mr. Bain?
Absolutely zero support, and zero support from anyone during my campaign election. Again, no IOUs. And in the first week which I sat in council, I actually stood and again I had an association because of school, spent 12 years knowing and I won't mention their name, but someone that I stood up in the first, I think it was our first meeting, when I asked for clarification with our rent relief package, and my criticism was actually directed towards someone that I'd spent some time with during school. So again, I think that's demonstrative and of my ability to remain totally impartial and always acting in best interest. That's my reputation, Frank. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Kath, can you just bring that down a little bit, please? Thank you. Question of the CEO, if I may.
Yeah.
What does the regulation say with regard to close personal associations with regard to conflicts of interest?
Sure. Look, first of all, I've said this before when I've been asked questions about conflict of interest by councillors. It's normal for councillors to have conflicts because you live in the community. You're members of sporting associations, or you have neighbours or friends or whatever it might be. So it's quite normal for these types of things to arise. The trick with conflicts of interest is firstly to recognise when they might arise, to declare that they've arisen, and then have a process to deal with them. So that's again a fairly normal process. As always, you've heard me say this before as well. It's almost like a continuum. You know, if I can take an example, it might be, you've got a friend. So you've got someone you met 6 years ago at a barbecue once. That's at one end, but that's very different to someone who might be the best man at your wedding or a bridesmaid at the wedding, or whatever it might be. It's a matter of degree. Similarly with election support. At one end, someone after the election might say, "Well, I voted for you." Oh, that's interesting. And at the other election is, who was your campaign manager? And within that, there's a range of sort of support. Ultimately, the test that the councils have to determine, and the test you've heard me talk about before, is would someone who's looking at this dispassionately or independently think that the council could look at this issue in the public interest, and then they put the public interest ahead of their own personal association with this person. That's the ultimate test that you need to make. And you make that decision, and you gather the information, and get that information through this process to be able to make that call.
I've got a question. Joe mentioned the words close and personal. Would you say you have a close personal relationship with the applicant?
Okay, I actually wrote this down and I submitted all this information to Brett before the meeting. Again, full disclosure, and Frank alerted me also to the video, which I actually hadn't remembered till then. So total full disclosure. I'm not going to risk a fine, misconduct, because someone allowed me to put a sign up. That's not who I am and what I do. Back to your question, Claire, am I a close family friend? Over 12 years that I've known the family, and this is because our children are both in the same year and attended the same school for 12 years. I actually asked this question of my husband, who had never been over their house for dinner. Over the 12 years, we've had probably 3 social events together. And one was recent because both our children shared a birthday party and have the same friends. But we've actually only been to each other's house maximum. I had to actually struggle to think how many times we've actually had dinner. But have we met each other on the beach and been at the same school events and surfing events? Absolutely. So I need to put that at the table. Also, I have to add that our children have actually changed schools. So in the last 12 months, we pulled our children out of St Andrews and they now go to Sunshine State High School. And the kids actually don't see each other as often as they do. So this weekend we just did state surfing titles, and Tim and my son, they surf together, but we were actually sitting at opposite ends of the beach. I went over and said hello, as we do. Like I said, we've got 12 years of school stuff and history together. But the association with my children is actually getting less frequent now that we've changed school, and I think any parent at this table knows that that's often the case.
Councillor, question for Councillor Lawrence, and I know you're all you've done a great job here. Full disclosure,
yep.
Would you be comfortable with us also including prior to the last sentence, which begins with Councillor Lawrenson,
yep.
we include Mr Bain also appeared in one of Councillor Lawrenson's videos circulated during the election campaign?
I have 100%. I have no problem with that. I also want to add, just as part of the discussion, that I've actually prepared an alternative.
So we'll just get this.
Oh, sorry. Yep,
appeared
sure.
in one of Councillor Lawrenson's videos.
Yep.
Circulated during the election campaign.
Yep.
Appeared in one Councillor Lawrenson's videos circulated during the election campaign.
Yep.
And you don't need to have the word election after Councillor Lawrenson.
Happy with that?
Thank you.
Can I also add that I have prepared an alternative motion to this application, and I've added.
I think we're probably getting off topic.
Oh,
here now,
okay, sorry.
Councillor. So
No,
if we'll
no
let
worries.
the council
Sure.
determine, make a decision on them.
So, so if you don't socialise with them regularly, you don't have regular catch-ups, phone contact, it would be fair to say that you're not a close personal friend. You may be an acquaintance and be friendly, but you're not a close personal associate, friend, not a close friend of the applicant.
No, my children are friends, and the phone contact we make is, are you picking up Tim? Are you picking up Ben? Can you bring them over? They drop off in front of our house, we have a chat, they go. That's pretty much my association.
I'm happy to move that councillors note perceived conflict of interest declaration of Councillor Lawrenson and resolve that this represents a perceived conflict of interest in the matter, and Councillor Lawrenson may remain in the meeting room to participate in the debate and vote on this matter.
I'll second that motion.
Seconded. Councillor Stewart.
I'd like to ask two further questions of Councillor Lawrenson, if I may, before voting on that.
Can I speak to it and then you can go?
Yeah,
That's
right.
I do so because I think it boils down to that issue of it's best to have as many councillors in this room as possible, and that we expect councillors to have strong connections to the community and have kids. I could be in very similar circumstances, say with the football club, where people I've known for years and that I'm actually going to use one of my son's soccer mate's dad's book in later debate. But they're only associates. The kids go out, you might give them a lift here or there. To me, that doesn't raise the issue of being a closely associate as would result in a real conflict of interest. I believe that the community has been made aware of the level of that assessment. There's no funding being provided during a campaign, and it appears that Mr. Mark Bain was providing his opinion on a policy issue, not actively advocating for any particular candidate on that video. And so for me, that does suggest that it isn't one that would be necessary for Councillor Lawrenson to lead the room.
And the point that Councillor Stockwell just raised there, just in that video, Mr. Bain was not in the background, but actually advocating a policy point that you were raising.
I asked a question whether whether the new council should reconsider introducing divisional councillors. That was the question.
Okay. And I think the question with regard, I think you clarified there with regard to dinners at each other's house. You don't frequent in the way of socialising in that. It's just in contact with coming through the social entities that you.
That's right, and a drink maybe after the comp. But again, Joe, maybe 3 times they've been over.
That's all I want to clarify from what I heard. Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion?
Just a question to the CEO. So, this is fine, but if more evidence comes up, will we be voting again on this Thursday?
Yeah.
The ordinary meeting?
So we're talking about this.
Yeah,
okay.
So every time a matter, so this is a recommendation today, been made by the General Committee to the Council meeting. The matter will be considered as the decision on Thursday night. The Council will have to make the same declaration on Thursday night, and the Council will have to consider that again on Thursday evening.
Can I just confirm that the declaration was made at the planning meeting? You were on the planning meeting on Tuesday?
No.
Not on the planning committee.
Oh no, you weren't. You're on the other
Yeah.
committee. Sorry. That's,
Councillors, I've wrestled with my conscience about this. I value more than almost anything the desire for councillors to work collegially in the best interests of the community and respectfully disagree where necessary. And for me, this is one of those occasions. In this case, the applicant who has lent their support to a councillor by appearing in an election campaign video has a matter before us which has potentially millions at stake and the potential to significantly change the nature of the North Shore if approved. Mayor Stewart and Councillor Finzel both set a fine example recently when a development applicant they'd known since the start of the election campaign had a matter before us. They declared a perceived conflict of interest and chose to leave the room. If another outcome occurs here, this will be the first time in NOOSA Council's history, as far as I know, when a councillor with a declared association with a development applicant with a matter before the council would be permitted to stay in the room and vote. It's always been, if in doubt, get out. And I appreciate the consideration given to this, but in this case I think it may be overly permissive. I hope councillors will allow me to respectfully dissent on this occasion, as I think the course of action chosen by Mayor Stewart and Councillor Finzel in matters involving links to development applicants is what ought to happen here. I will respect the majority vote on this, but I need to have the record show I did not support this motion, and I'm happy to be the sole dissenter on this occasion. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'll have my 2 cents worth. I see the points raised by Councillor Stockwell, and I see that we would all fall into the situation of coming across people in our daily lives, in our daily social contacts and all the rest of it. So I have left the room where we're a far closer relationship than that with someone that does some development around the area, has had an application before us, but in this instance I see from that element I'm not challenged by the social contact. I am a little leaning a little towards the way Councillor Wilkie is the fact that an election campaign features comments from this developer. But as has been pointed out, the developer was not actually supporting the candidate at the time. They were actually supporting a policy point. It's a moot point, but I'm prepared to take that on face value, that it wasn't an endorsement of the candidate in this case, but only on a policy point. So I'm happy to support the recommendation.
I'll speak to the motion too.
Yes.
Look, I don't have a problem with Councillor Lawrenson. I appreciate her being so fully and frank in her disclosure. Look, clearly there's no personal relationship, there's not a close personal relationship. And if we looked at on merit all the relationships we have with all the parents and all the kids and all the people who pick up our kids and drop them home from school and whatever, there would be a long bow, and it would probably excuse us from most, if not all, meetings. In regard to I have no problem either in regard to the video, because it was purely by circumstance that he was there. It was taken at the beach. It wasn't Councillor Lawrence seeking out the applicant to do the video. It was, hey, we're all here on the beach. The applicant happened to be there. It was a circumstantial. So really, that to me it could have been Winnie the Pooh standing there. He would have been in the video. So, you know, like...
It would have been a good video.
It would have been. I'd like to have seen that video.
But like, the point is, it was just circumstantial that he happened to be there, right place, right time, and he was one of many in the video. So for me, the video actually carries a little weight, and I'm happy to support Councillor Lawrence staying in the room.
Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Webber.
It's a chilling effect on our job here and what we can do, but as councillors, when circumstances way before a person hops and is in your video or seen to be with you on a social basis, that you've got to have to leave the room. I think that I hope that this council is it goes to the one side of the spectrum where we're not making decisions based on who can leave the room, but we're based on the merits.
Thank you. Councillor Stockwell, you wish to close?
Yes, and I thank you for your alternate perspective, because there's no doubt that this is a perceived conflict of interest and it's a line ball one. In the past, the benchmark has, did they do something like hand out how to vote cards for you? Did they put flyers in? So they're endorsing you as a candidate. In this case, it fell short of that, and in my opinion, it's better to have councillors in the room with a clear declaration of what their interests are, and it's up to the debate to determine where this matter lies.
Thank you. Put the motion. Those in favour? That's Councillor Stockwell, Stewart, Wegener and Juricic. Those against? Councillor Wilkie. The motion's carried. All right, now we move on to the first item. Kerry, there's been extra information since Friday. Could you talk us through that, please?
Yes, so Friday we received additional information from the applicant's engineer, proposing an alternative strategy of how the pool may be initially filled and continue to be topped up to manage those pool water levels. The applicant now proposes that the pool will be filled over a couple of months during the wet season by directing runoff from the catchment into a temporary dam. And the plan on the screen indicates the catchment area, which is in blue, and the dam, there's a small dam located beside the wave pool. You can see that here on the plans, just adjacent here. So water is intended to be directed to that dam via some bunds constructed, 400-metre long bunds on the site, to direct water runoff into those dams and to fill the wave pool. So the applicant indicates that may take a couple of months to do so. We've not been able to verify the calculations yet. We've asked our hydrologist to have a look at it, but that's the indication. So they've also indicated they may look to provide a further tank on site to help with ongoing topping up of the dam and to help manage the water levels of that pool. So they've just said may. They haven't indicated that's a definite. There's no additional details provided on water treatment, how that would occur, and because the concern is the water coming off the catchment could be quite, would certainly be tannin in colour, which I don't think is probably ideal for their wave pool, and could contain dirt and the like. So they would need to treat that water coming off that catchment. There's no details on how that would occur. Whilst that potentially resolves the issue of trucks on, water tankers on the road to fill the pool, it does not resolve the other issues raised by officers in the report, and certainly raises some further clearing that would need to occur for that bund, 400 metres long. It's likely a 400 metre bund would at least be 3 metres wide, or the area would be disturbed 3 metres wide to construct that bund, and it still remains unclear how the water would be treated. So that's the applicant's proposal that's come in on Friday. As I said, we've got a hydrologist reviewing that, and I hope to have more information before Thursday's meeting, just with some final comments around whether that's practical, because obviously it raises issues that during heavy rain the ground would be quite waterlogged, and how does that work in terms of runoff. We're not quite sure whether that's a reasonable solution as yet. We're still having a look at it. One thing that has come up through this additional information is though that potentially the pool is twice the volume of what we previously understood. So if they were to use tankers, it would not just take potentially up to 40 days to fill, it would be around 77 days to fill. And that's the worst case scenario, obviously, and using one tanker.
Can I just ask a clarification on what the volume of the pool is supposed to be? Because the videos that I've seen or been shown have been of quite a shallow pool. Yeah. What sort of depth are we talking over? I mean, it's a very large pool, but what sort of depth are we talking? What's the volume expected?
Yeah, so the volume indicated, what we received on Friday was 5,700 kilolitres. The depth?
It's between 0.5 metre and 1.5 metres. So the original estimates that were done by our hydrologists were based on that, and then they provided that additional information on Friday.
Which is relatively shallow.
5.7 million litres.
Yeah. Can I further question if I may, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, of course, Mr. Chair.
With regard to evaporation rates with such a large surface area, have any calculations been done on the sort of evaporation rates and the amount of retopping that would be expected over the period of a year?
Not specifically for that. There was some calculations done on the original idea of filling it just with natural rainwater falling into the pool, and our hydrologist did some calculations based on rainfall versus evaporation, and it was basically the pool would never fill because of that evaporation.
Third question, if I may.
Yep.
The nearby beach houses resort has a common community area that houses quite a swimming pool. Do we have any idea on the volume of water that's housed in that, and the chemical treatment of the pool, how that's achieved, but also the discharge of the water from that in comparison to what may happen here?
Yeah, I don't know the size of it, but we could find out for you. It's certainly smaller and
Yeah,
less than
the depth varies, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't be anything near this
no,
sort
it
of
wouldn't be
size, but I mean,
anywhere
I'd
near this
be
size
interested to
or
know the
volume.
comparison and how that was approved with regard to water
Yeah.
treatment and water discharge.
Yeah, certainly on wastewater for the adjoining Beach Road holiday homes is disposed of in the designated effluent disposal area, which this site also has access to. And that area was originally cleared because of the previous camel usage over the site, and is also treated in the tertiary plant on the northern site opposite the other side of the Beach Road holiday homes.
Okay, so effluent from homes and all the like is also subject, and I'm imagining there's a number of septic systems on the North Shore as well. But from the beach house development, how is given the environmentally sensitive nature of the area on the North Shore, how is all of that effluent treated with regard to homes and resorts and the pub, for example, over there?
Yeah. So both the southern side, this side of Beach Road, all the Beach Road holiday homes, and the northern side are all now treated by a tertiary effluent plant, which was installed around 2008 approximately, and approved by the state. So it's a tertiary treatment plant that's located on the northern side. So all Beach Road holiday homes, the pub, the camping grounds all go to that plant, and the water is then disposed of potentially on both sites, on the northern site as well as pumped back over to this site to dispose in that area that was previously.
So the water achieves a certain quality.
Yes, that's
to be
right.
disposed of. What about the solids and the waste that come from that? Do they?
That's handled by the treatment plant. So at times that has to be removed from the plant and cleaned out, but the wastewater is treated to the highest standard that was able to be done at the time. It was quite specific in the approval. The original development approval for the Beach Road holiday homes sought to dispose of wastewater in amongst the vegetation, but the environment advice at the time was that would likely kill the vegetation on the North Shore and on the site, because it's such a low nutrient environment. So the disposal area is quite purposefully identified as being in that area that was cleared of vegetation and previously damaged by the camels that were on the site.
Okay, so effluent becomes nutrient rich, but water from a pool wouldn't necessarily be nutrient rich. It would maybe contain chemicals that would affect, I imagine, pH of the water to be discharged. Could that be managed?
Good question. We don't have a report on how they're proposing to manage that water and treat the water. And I'm not a chemist to advise you fully on that.
Nor am I, that's why I'm seeking more information.
Yeah. So there's no proposal put forward on how they treat it.
At this
if they
stage.
put forward a proposal, then we would have had external consultant assess it for you, but there's no proposal.
Thank you.
Is it correct, Kerry, that the effluent disposal design does not require the connection to the existing disposal easement forgoes the requirement to clear 2.7 hectares of vegetation on Beach Road?
The applicant is not proposing to dispose of it in the on-site effluent area, the designated effluent area. Does that answer your question?
No, my question was more about the clearing with the effluent. The information here says that the existing, it does not require the connection to the existing effluent disposal easement and forgoes the requirement to clear 2.7 hectares of vegetation along Beach Road, which means that the net benefit of vegetation would be 1.6 hectares. Is that correct?
So that information is coming from the applicant?
Yes.
Yeah, so certainly the applicant's not proposing to dispose of it to the effluent area. Part of that effluent area, we'll just bring up that map again, it might show us. Part of that effluent area is fully cleared. Other parts remains partly vegetated but disturbed by the camels. Is the effluent area shown in the report?
It should be shown on one of the plans,
Yeah, which page?
Actually, I don't know if
See
we
if
included
the
it as an
effluent area is
attachment.
identified in the report for you, but essentially it's this cleared area
Page
here.
38.
It's already clear.
It's already cleared?
That's where the pool disposal
That's where
area.
everything's disposed of currently.
Wow.
They needed to have also a secondary area as a backup plan, which is in this area here, which was previously disturbed by the camels. So there is an easement over this property, over this area, which is the area intended for on-site effluent disposal for the development of this site, as well as sites further further west.
Mhm.
This proposal doesn't propose to include it in the on-site effluent disposal area.
Just looking at that, Kerry, can you confirm how many of the houses next door? How many Beach Road houses are there?
There's 48 in
48,
total.
yeah.
48 in total. And that large in the middle, what's that? That's their big.
That's their leisure pool
That's
area.
their leisure
That's a
pool
community
area.
area.
Yeah, I've been
So I
there.
guess
Yeah.
when Councillor Joe asked the size of the pool, I think the pool is just
Pools there, you
here.
can see.
There's
the size.
tennis
You can see
courts
it's
there
very
too.
different
Yeah.
scale.
And tennis courts there as well, aren't
Tennis
there?
courts, there's a little barbecue, there's a little building with some meeting rooms there, and it was intended to serve
Communal
all of
facilities, yeah.
the development on the southern side.
How big are these Beach Road? I think you referred to them as eco cabins in the. How big are they? Is it?
But they're the size of a house, so they're between 200 and 300 square metres generally.
So and there's 48 of them.
Yep.
And they're 3, 4, and potentially 5 bedroom houses.
Yes. Yep.
And they're how big? Sorry. 300?
Between 200 and 300 square metres.
So and they're not they weren't considered a detached dwelling at the time.
They applied for them as visitor accommodation, and there's a condition on the approval that limits it only to visitor accommodation.
But in the same size, and what we're looking at in regard to a detached dwelling of what's being proposed to be built on this site, it's basically exactly the same. It's 347 square metres. It's basically exactly the same as 48 houses that are being directly built next door.
Yeah.
Have been built next door.
They're definitely a similar scale and size. They are different in design in terms of the ones that are already built are built on posts. So they have a very lightweight footprint on the surrounding area. So they're built up on posts. They were carefully sited in amongst vegetation with very limited vegetation cleared to site them. So it was quite a different approach by that developer compared to what we're looking at here. This is a slab on ground construction. It's not up on posts, and they've located that dwelling it's up on a knoll to try and afford views out to NOOSA coastline.
I've been there. I drove out and scratched my car in the process. Yeah, I don't know if you said that, Bill, too.
I didn't scratch mine.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to visit the site. So this is one dwelling, and we've got a problem with it not being considered visitor accommodation because it's considered a detached dwelling because of the size. Yeah,
No, I haven't raised the size.
but it's a detached dwelling. You're not considering it a guest house or an eco cabin or a retreat.
Yeah.
But then we have 48 right next door that are size-wise very similar. So the only thing different is of how they're being built. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're not saying that this proposal is a house because of the size of it. So that's not the statement in the officer's report. What we're saying is this applicant has applied for visitor accommodation type 3, which is meant to have an environmental connection with the land. It's about providing cabins and guest retreats on the site. And this is essentially one house on one lot. It's a house. It's not consistent with the definition for visitor accommodation type 3. So nothing to do with the size of it. Yes, I acknowledge they're similar size. If they had proposed 5 of these, we wouldn't be raising the issue that it's not consistent with the definition.
Would you be fair to say potentially that could be considered a guest house, which would fall under the definition?
This is a house. Under the scheme that they lodged, a house could be used either as short-term accommodation or permanent accommodation. So this proposal is just that. It's just a house.
But it's a house that's only going to be used, and it's a house that's going to be potentially used as a retreat. It's effectively a surface retreat if we think about what the wave pool is.
Yeah.
So it could be considered a guest house or a retreat located in a rural setting.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the houses in the Shire that are used as a retreat. They're just as a house. They're just short-term accommodation. They're a house under the 2006 planning scheme. So this is no different to the many houses in the Shire that are used as visitor accommodation.
But the primary use of the accommodation, Carey, is it not to rent out to guests and used as a retreat? And so the dominant purpose is a retreat, and the ancillary use is the wave pool. The reason people are frequenting or wanting to pay big dollars to use the retreat is because they have access to exclusive use of this lagoon wave pool.
Or is there a question there, or is that
Well,
a
I'm
statement,
asking,
Councillor?
am I correct in what I've just said?
And if you can explain what ancillary means, I think
Yeah.
there might be some confusion.
Yeah.
about that.
So there is a definition in the report of ancillary, and I'll just get the right page. I think it's page 14 of the report of the Planning and Environment Agenda. I'll just bring your attention to that. So this is the definition that's included in the NOOSA Plan 2006, and it says ancillary means associated with, but incidental and subordinate to. So I would agree there is some association, but I would not say it is incidental or subordinate. This wave park is over 4,000 square metre area. It has significant impacts on the site that come not because of the visitor accommodation, the house component. It has its own impacts. It's this use that Queensland Parks has raised objection to. So it is not ancillary. It is a separate use because it raises new and different impacts to the visitor accommodation.
Councillor Stockwell, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, I did. From a planning perspective, would it be more accurate to say that this development is a development of a wave pool with an ancillary dwelling house?
I would more accept that than the way the applicant has proposed this, yes.
Councillor Jewison?
Without talking to it, it's difficult to turn around. Could ancillary be considered if this is not to be used as a public access facility, but only for access of the people staying at the dwelling, does that therefore not consider it to be an ancillary use? That the primary use is to occupy the dwelling before utilising the facility. Would that not constitute ancillary?
No, that alone does not. I do agree that in some respect, on some level, it suggests it may be ancillary because it's only going to be used by people staying in the visitor accommodation. So on some level, I accept that. But I don't on another level, given the scale of it and the potential impacts that this proposal will have. This is the primary use. This is why people will go to the site. They're not going there for the accommodation. They're going there for the wave park.
I see the point you raised.
Yep.
With regard to it being a dwelling, isn't defining it or approving it as short stay accommodation, making it short stay accommodation, it can't be used for any other purpose, and it's therefore got a maximum stay time of 3 months?
A condition of approval can't change the use. It can try and clarify it. What officers are trying to say is the applicant has applied for the wrong use in the first place. That they should have made application for a house as well as the entertainment and dining use for the wave park. So a condition doesn't address the fact that the application has been incorrectly made.
So it's no longer associated with the holiday houses over there, the NOOSA holiday houses over there. It's a separate parcel of land now, and has no restriction as the other holiday homes have for short stay accommodation. It could actually be a permanent residence. Is that what you're saying?
No.
I said that's what I understood by what you said there. My understanding is that due to the holiday homes there and that being all part of the parcel, any residence on this property must be short stay accommodation. That's all that they can apply for.
Yeah. No, people can make. No application is prohibited in terms of the planning scheme. People can make an application for any use.
Likely to be approved because of the use that the planning scheme uses.
Yeah, this lot is a separate lot, and they could apply for visitor accommodation. They could apply for a house on the site.
Mm-hmm. It's true that there was a number of people in 2017 in the Beach Road guest houses who applied to the Planning and Environment Court to have permanent accommodation there, and it was rejected, wasn't it? So it's only for short stay next door.
That's
for Beach
right.
Road.
The next door is limited only to short-term visitor.
So you would imagine that this would be the same in this situation as well if it did go to a court. Well, the court just found that for Beach Road, that could only be for short stay.
I think they're a little bit different scenarios. I'm not sure where the comparison's being drawn because next door is approved as visitor accommodation only.
Yeah.
The application that went to court applied for 19 of them, or I think they reduced it during the court process to less, to be used for a permanent accommodation for
the owners.
Yeah. The council refused that, and the court upheld council's decision. So they didn't agree that it was appropriate for permanent accommodation on the site. they supported council's position that it should be maintained for visitor accommodation. So
So
I'm not sure how we
So
can
on that
compare.
Where I see the comparison is that what's being applied
Is this a
for here.
comment, Joe, or a question?
I'm asking the question. What's being applied for here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is short stay accommodation, not a dwelling house. Is that correct?
The applicant has lodged it for visitor accommodation type 3. What officers are advising is that it does not constitute that use, it does not meet that definition under the NOOSA plan, and they should have made application for a house.
So if there were, by what you were saying though, if there were more accommodation residences applied for, short stay accommodation residents applied for, and up to, I think 6 or 8 could be mentioned here, that would then
Yes,
facilitate visitor accommodation
That would-
because of the nature of it, rather
That's
than
right.
one, it's a shared facilitation for a number of.
yeah,
Okay, I see.
that would truly provide visitor accommodation.
Okay, I'm just trying to clarify the difference between 1 and 6.
Yeah,
Or 1 and 48.
No, 48 can't be built on this site, only 6. 6 is potentially the maximum that could be built on this site with the land available under the current planning scheme.
under the NOOSA plan 2006, you
Yes.
could build up to 6. Under the current NOOSA plan 2020,
Yeah.
I think up to 14. Officers though have, there is environmental constraints on this site. There's state koala habitat
And the
mapping.
new state koala habitat.
They would probably only fit 6, but that's an exercise that would have to be gone
Okay,
through.
just trying to get the definition between 1 and 6 for the difference.
Councillor Stockwell.
So yeah, you just raised one of the essential aspects of this, and that is the range of environmental values. In the applicant's ecological assessment report, he does raise a range of species, one of them being the vulnerable glossy black cockatoo, and it's probably to Council's ecologist now. It mentions that if I look at the glossy black cockatoo fact sheet, it talks about this species using eucalypts for breeding. As such, nesting sites are mainly in areas containing large old trees. Hollows used for nests are usually between 10 to 20 metres above ground in vertical or near vertical branches, stems and sprouts. I then looked at the fact sheet from New South Wales on hollows, and it specifically mentions that.
Is there a question?
Yeah, there
please?
is. It's an important aspect because I think we can focus on koalas, but people haven't grasped its importance for the glossback cockatoo.
So that's the point you're making.
No, I have a question to come out of it. A very definite question. I'm just going to. So the hollow formation is dependent on trees' history, and that the hollow for things like the glossy back cockatoo may be greater than 200 years old, these trees. So the question is, do you believe that the trees on this site that would be cleared for the wave pool are sufficiently old, high, and with sufficient hollows to present habitat for nesting of the glossy black cockatoo, which is vulnerable?
Okay, two-part answer. There are trees on this site that do represent those values. They've got well-developed hollows, and whether they're in that footprint or not, the information provided by the applicant was a bit depauperate. It seemed like it was the old information from 2008 that would supported the original, even though the time difference is. I'm not sure whether in that footprint and in terms of the construction of that, whether any trees
With the specific hollows
would be destroyed. So we don't have enough information to quantify that for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The other aspect that probably is a little bit less well known is also the species of acid frogs and the crayfish. Now they're more likely to be closer to the wetlands and their habitat, which is just outside the site. The applicant is proposing all around that border to get to the house from the eastern border and up to have access, which is likely to have at least some sort of gravel bedding with clay content to bind it. Is that a threatening process in terms of those species, in terms of the increased fine particles in a sandy environment that may have an impact on the vulnerable frogs and vulnerable, or is it endangered crayfish?
Yeah, endangered crayfish, yes. The swamp crayfish is very sensitive to disturbance in both its habitat and fines running into its habitat. So as much as a buffer as possible to the wetlands is it's unquantifiable again, but you've just really got to manage and mitigate the sediment loss coming off of that site. I know that there's only one borehole log in that particular, in the wave pool area, so I've got no information. I've only got one borehole log about the depth of the indurating layer between the top surface and the groundwater. So I'm not sure how the excavations for the temporary dam, for the tank, for the walls, the weight of the actual structure, the concrete that they're going to use on it, how that's all going to impact on the wetlands, and whether it's going to actually push water out or displace groundwater. So thus it'll have this impact on the wetland and the buffer between the wetland and the development site.
And I suppose the final one in terms of the potential impact, we talked about the dam being built, and there would be a need to filter it. Quite often that things like aluminium sulfate is used to take the turbid water and clean it, and that's got a high pH. Is changes to pH a significant threatening process for things that are adapted to the acid water environment or aquatic environments like the frogs?
Yeah. So here, water quality is an issue. So the discharge of the wastewaters, it's how you treat the tannins, how you treat the acidity levels to get it to match the naturally occurring acidic levels that actually permeate through the soils and get their acidity through the basically the wallum and the wetlands. That's a key factor in how it's going to impact on threatened species, particularly acid-dependent threatened species.
So in your experience and knowledge, is there a means of water treatment that could meet the ecological standards? Is that achieved anywhere else? Particularly with acid sulfate soils and pH levels?
Yeah, no, it's you basically need to put it through a whole big land filter. That's the natural environment is the best filter itself, but then you're going to have those ongoing issues with the when it's running through that natural environment. That's going to be where the
reeds and grasses and the like that actually take the nutrient rich
biofilters
or pH. Okay. Thank you.
Right.
I've got a couple more questions.
Yeah, Amelia.
Kerry, would you consider the application as being an eyesore? Can you see it from the road, the beach, or from neighbouring properties? And just other questions, will it be integrated into the landscape?
There's a 20-metre wide buffer to road frontages that was established as part of Beach Road Holiday Homes.
Yep.
So from the road itself, you won't see this wave park.
You won't.
You won't see the wave park. What might become obvious over time is vegetation dieback around the lagoon and the on-site effluent area. But again, limited visibility into the site. It's a very large site.
Yep.
The lagoon is quite a distance from the road.
Are they proposing to operate the wave pool at night time?
They've indicated they may look to have it at night, but it'll be prominently during the day.
At the moment, it's
Is
just
there any
during the day.
lighting that's been proposed?
No.
No. Can I ask how many have the neighbours or the residents of the North Shore have any of them complained or put in a written objection to the application?
We have the Beach Road Holiday Homes who have objected, who are right
That's in
next door.
relation to body corporate issues. That's quite
That
separate
was the primary
to
issue they
objecting to.
raised. That's right.
And those concerns, have they been addressed?
We've determined that the application is properly made and doesn't require body corporate's consent.
Yep. So in relation to the actual size of the wave pool, it's 4,000 square metres. How does that compare to the scale of other dams in the Noosa Shire?
The footprint?
Yep, 4,000 square metres. Is that comparable in scale and size to other dams that are found, say, in the Noosa North Shore or other places in Noosa Shire?
Okay.
I'm trying to just get an idea of size. Are we talking dam, a standard dam, a dam size?
It would be a very large farm dam, bigger than most farm dams that I've seen in the Shire. So it's much larger than most farm dams I see.
The equivalent of a natural waterway somewhere. I mean, a lake.
Yeah, just
there's
to
a
get
probably the Lake
people.
Karoi that I could think off the top of my head. But
Yeah.
that's a natural waterway.
So if you envisage it this way, it's got a 4,000 square metre water surface area.
Yep.
If you think about a standard house lot is 600 square metres.
Yep.
So what's that? It's large.
It's 6.6.
Six.
About
Four quarter acre blocks.
nearly 7 times a standard house lot.
Four quarter acre blocks. So.
Yeah.
My other question is that I understand that the owner is in negotiations at the moment to preserve the vegetation along the frontage of the site and extinguish the easement for overflow. Is that correct?
Not that they've approached council with or officers, no. I'm not aware of any proposal around that. They would need council consent to distinguish the easement for the on-site effluent, as well as the adjoining body corporate owners.
Okay. So I've read in the papers that they're proposing to use an advanced enviroseptic system to get around using the neighbouring effluent disposal unit and to avoid irrigation that was designated on the easement site. Can you explain this system, and is it sensitive to the environment, and would council recommend this type of system in this location?
So the applicant, through their application material they've lodged with council, has not proposed any system or described how the water will be treated on site. So we don't have any sort of proposal put forward as part of the application material.
Can I interrupt? Sorry, I think that's just for the house that they're talking about for that as well. It's got nothing to do with the wave pool itself. I think it's just
for
the
house.
Septic for the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, is my understanding.
And that's what I've understood also. So the question is that type of system sensitive to the environment? Is it something we would recommend?
They haven't actually provided the details of what septic they're proposing for the house. They've just stated that it would have its own on-site septic system, but no details were provided.
Okay. And we've also sort of already touched this. Can the owner further expand the site? And we've mentioned 6 to 8. They can add 6 to 8 more buildings or units on the site, or eco units.
The applicant would always have the option to come back and make another application for more visitor accommodation on the site if they wished. They would just be restricted particularly by the state koala habitat mapping, which now prohibits development on certain parts of the site.
Okay. And my last question in relation to ancillary, the meaning of ancillary. There was a case, I think, Caravan, that just further added to our definition of ancillary, and I just want to know what council's position on it is. So I think the case was Caravan Parks Association of Queensland, and Judge Kefford sort of expanded a little bit on the meaning of ancillary as meaning something added or attached for convenience and attractiveness. Can it not be argued that a wave pool is added for attractiveness, makes the visitor accommodation retreat more attractive because of the wave pool?
I would imagine that would be the applicant's position, but I don't agree that this is ancillary in any way. And the case you cite was against Rockhampton City Council to have RV parks in the Kershaw Gardens, which was the major gardens in Rockhampton, and the council was suggesting it was ancillary, and the judge found that it wasn't. So yeah, while that case goes to some discussion around ancillary, I don't think it proves that this use is ancillary use. It might add to the attractiveness, but it has significant impacts on the site.
So just to clarify, in that case, the judge didn't accept that definition of ancillary?
No, the judge did have a discussion around what was ancillary, but didn't accept that RVs, parking of overnight accommodation at the Kershaw Gardens, was ancillary.
Yeah. Brian?
I'd like to move the staff recommendation with...
well, time's getting on. You can still ask questions during the debate, Councillor. Yeah.
So with the staff recommendation with an additional item, which is C as read there. If it's too long to read the whole,
read the C.
I'll read the C. Yes. Note the addition to the staff recommendation is note the application was lodged under NOOSA Plan 2006, which was superseded by the NOOSA Plan 2020, which commenced on the 31st July 2020. All references to the NOOSA Plan or the planning scheme within the assessment report is in reference to the now superseded NOOSA Plan 2006.
Okay. Have a second of it. Well, Councillor Stewart, you're able to ask questions now.
No, you're not.
Second.
Oh, before a second, you're right, yeah.
You can ask questions.
Sorry, just through the chair, I need to correct one matter.
Yes.
With the information that came in on Friday, that would result in additional clearing than what these reasons indicate. So if I just may suggest reason 6A, that we just delete 1.24 hectares.
Yeah, and just leave it as blank.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, on page 17, Kerry, on the P&E agenda, the proposal does not achieve the above relevant outcomes of the NOOSA North Shore Locality Code.
Okay.
The inclusion of a 4,000 metre squared lagoon wave pool is not low key. Can you talk to me a little bit about what are the outcomes of the NOOSA North Shore Locality Code? What are the achievable design outcomes for that?
So the locality code goes back, has some history. Over time there's been a lot of historical development applications on the North Shore that sought to put in large-scale resort developments, some with airstrips and the like. There was a development control plan established in 1995, and the NOOSA plan provisions about low-key come from that development control plan. And those provisions are around recognising the unique qualities of the North Shore, that this has significant environmental values, conservation values, that it is very much a wilderness setting. It's almost like the last frontier. When people cross the ferry, they're into a different environment. So for a long time, subdivision has been not supported on the North Shore, NOOSA North Shore, to protect those qualities. There's been key sites, 5 sites, designated for visitor accommodation, with no other sites supported by the planning scheme or the DCP for visitor accommodation. So it's really about very much low key, keeping the extent of development very small scale and making sure the conservations are the paramount and most important on the North Shore.
So how would we justify having a pub over there with a big jumping thing for kids and a big outdoor playground, and we've got an equestrian centre just down the road and a high ropes course all within a close precinct? How do we justify a pub being low key?
Yeah, some things we have to live with. The land on the North Shore was subdivided early last century. The pub was, I don't know, developed around the 70s, 80s maybe, I'm not quite sure. And they were there, and we have to live with them. We can't shut them down, they're lawfully there.
I think my recollection, the sort of threshold or the watershed moment was when councils had, and the lawyers might remember, one of the most famous planning cases in Queensland, the Leisure Mark case, which was many years ago, and it sort of set the benchmark for a lot of planning appeals over the years. So that was the application for golf courses and multi-storey hotels and airstrips or airport over there, and that was the one that probably got the community to think about what's the NOOSA North Shore going to look like over the next 20, 50 years. Do we want development there, or don't we want intense development? And probably from that flowed the development control plan that Kerry talked about, and ultimately the 1997 planning scheme. So that's a bit of the history in terms of that application actually triggered a debate about whether or not that was land that needed to be developed like the rest of the Sunshine Coast, or should it be kept in a more pristine state and lower levels of development.
So it'd be fair to say that those type of developments precede planning schemes and that have pre-existing use rights as a result and have been developed in more modern times as a result of those pre-existing uses.
It certainly preceded the 1995 DCP, where there was, the community were very concerned about the development proposals that were proposed there, and there was some strong planning provisions put in place to protect it going forward.
Sorry, I just had a question. So what year was that pub built? Sorry, Kerry, did you say?
I'm not exactly sure when it was built, but before the development, maybe the 70s. I can try and find out, but
no upgrades since the 70s.
Oh, there'd be upgrades for sure.
There's been upgrades since then.
Certainly there's been more development. This is one of the sites that's identified this site as well as the pub site for visitor accommodation on the North Shore. So these are two of 5 sites identified for visitor accommodation.
When I asked about the opportunity cost about this site, because it is obviously only one of 5 sites, and you said it's a very important piece to maintain for visitor accommodation, and there is the potential to have 6 cabins. That's not that many if we compare potentially 12 with what's being proposed to 6 cabins. It's not like we can have 100 visitors on this site, is there? So the opportunity cost is, my question is, it's actually not that much different, is it, if we can only put 6 cabins on that site versus what's proposed?
Yeah, certainly since the koala habitat mapping changed in February, it's very restrictive on the site. Prior to that, I would have envisaged something like what's happened next door, the 48 cabins to go on this site. So it is very limited. In terms of comparison, is it much different? 6 families, 12 people, maybe not. They're not that significant in numbers.
Or 12 people, 2 in each cabin.
2 in each cabin, that's
so
right.
So it's by the
by.
by.
I mean, 6 cabins, you might have 6 families or you might have couples.
Yeah.
It's not a lot different. There's some differences, but not a lot.
Yeah.
If councillors are fine, we'll move this along. We have a seconder for the recommendation, please.
Yeah,
Motion. Councillor Juricevic, Councillor Stockwell.
It's good because the control manager and the CEO has started my presentation for me. Councillors, this planning scheme is about, this planning application brings into focus one of the pillars of strategic planning in NOOSA for over a generation. What we're talking about here today, it's not just is this the right development, but is it the right development in the right location? And the NOOSA North Shore Development Control Plan was mentioned, and it took a long time to get adopted because I only have the draft, which was put out to public in February 1992. And as the CEO mentioned, it was after we had a development furore with 7,000 people, an international airport and a bridge going across, and we said, no, that's not what we want for the North Shore. Councillors, South East Queensland ends just outside that window. Soon as you cross the river, you're in the wilderness of the Great Sandy. And that's what the planning has been since the late 1980s. So what is it that we said? The aim of that development control plan, as I said, I'm quoting out the draft, is to acknowledge the area's role as the southern entry of the Great Sandy region and the role of the Noosa River as a buffer between the Shire's urban areas and Cooloola National Park. And it had objectives of to control the extent of development to the North Shore by retention of most private freehold land within the rural preservation zone, to provide minimum urban type services as a means of limiting the intensity and impact of development, and to utilise natural assets of the area and its separateness from the balance of the Shire as a means to broaden the nature-based recreation experience of residents and visitors. It also talks about to require the retention of substantial wildlife and flora corridors and not to build a bridge. That's been consistently applied. When we get here, and Kathy, if you can bring up that point, here is the network based on landform, landscape, aesthetic, environment values in Noosa Shire in 1996. So this was the underpinning planning study that led to the now probably planning history of the 1997 strategic plan. And here you see the North Shore is all identified in pink, and that suggests that it was core environmental corridor for the Shire. In fact, that corridor is mapped by the state as of state biodiversity significance. Not local, it's in the biodiversity overlay, not regional, which is the next category up, but state level of significance for the corridor we're talking about. Then we go to 2002, when we did the NOOSA North Shore Management Plan. And what did it say? It talked about no increase in commercial activities beyond current levels and approvals except for uses that have virtually no impact on the environment. It also went to say that the heath should not be cleared or developed. Also, any proposed developments nearby that could affect quality of the supply of water, the heath should be strictly controlled. And that's why the question I asked before. in terms of the roadworks to access the site and the potential in terms of water quality. Okay, if the further development of the resort and caravan park, low priority should be the retention of natural areas and provision of low impact activities such as walking and nature study, rather than development of high impact sports facilities, for example, tennis courts. And finally, it identifies the range of vulnerable and rare flora and fauna that's over there. Councillors, this has been consistent. There has been nothing changed in the way the planning scheme of NOOSA and this council has approached the North Shore. So in this, the strategic framework document that came out 27 years later, it talks about on the North Shore, no further subdivision is permitted. The area is largely dedicated for conservation, limited visitor accommodation, and services are provided in the tourist accommodation and the recreation and open space zone. And it goes on, well, it went to NOOSA Council has consistently taken a long-term planning approach to sustainable planning. It is the long-term approach that has ensured that the community's values and principles are not diminished by unintended development decisions. The approach is also the Shire's economic strengths. It has created a consistent and well-recognised NOOSA brand that provides a unique advantage and a natural point of distance. I believe the new NOOSA plan is just the latest iteration of over 20 years. As I said, the state identifies it as the site itself as state significance biodiversity habitat for endangered or vulnerable species. It's adjacent to very high level of aquatic conservation significance, and it's, where are we? And I've already mentioned about the state biodiversity corridor. Councillors, some of the debate in the community has been about the importance that it might relate to the surfing culture of NOOSA. So I thought about this, and I thought, I haven't surfed seriously or much at all since the 70s. And I thought, well, I wonder if Phil Jarrett in his book on A Cup of Tea with God has any indication. And in that, he goes to great lengths to say that the battle to save the headland and coastal national park was just one of the many fights that this community's had to protect, which is now, in this case, a national surfing reserve, but the now international surfing reserve, and that's part of the culture. But I knew there was something else, and I remembered, as I said, one of my son's soccer mates' father wrote a book, and he talked to me about one of the themes. So I went looking, I got out of the library. It's called NOOSA. What's your point? A place in the history of surfing. And maybe the next picture might give a historic perspective. Because on the page that said, why NOOSA, the whole surfing world wants to live, surf in NOOSA, we have a rather nice little black and white photo of a legend of the local NOOSA surfing. But what this highlights is that it says, even though after 50 years, surfers won't stop at any time soon. It's a magical place despite being loved to death on many days, weekends or not. It is difficult at times, impossible to get a park within the QE. The surf can be overcrowded as anywhere, but still they come. You see, the natural environment is simply stunning. The development has mostly been handled well and the waves are memorable.
Sorry, Councillor, just stop you. Councillors, that's just a little bit over 5 minutes. Are you happy for all councillors to speak longer than 5 minutes today?
I'm happy to indulge
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
I'm never kidding.
Yeah. As long as it's not 10.
10's your maximum.
7.5, I think it's just cut it
As
there.
long as I got the picture of Councillor Tom, I'm happy.
No slideshow, no slideshow.
Naturally, as surfers, the waves are a major reason for our love of the place. But most surfers are involved with a strong connection to the environment that goes with their waves. NOOSA has it all. And finally, a big shout out has to go to the local government agencies, plus all the volunteers and residents who have helped preserve much of what makes NOOSA special. So councillors, from a surfing culture perspective, this is a special place. I don't believe it's the right development in the right place. I believe that significant conservation with being a wildlife habitat for endangered and vulnerable adjacent to that high aquatic value and within the biodiversity corridor means we have to stick to what has been planned for this place for over a generation.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Wegener.
Can I stand up to talk?
If you
because
want.
I've been working on this for a long time.
Sure.
I think I owe it to the community and the councillors to explain why I have been supportive of this site in some ways. And it's because I've been traveling for 45 years looking for great surf destinations, and I know a bit about it, and I can see why surfers and some people get very excited about this. And it's because when you come to NOOSA, very often the surf is not real good. It's about half the time. It's onshore, it can be blue ball, we have problems. And this is up on the North Shore. And the ultimate goal of going to this place as a surfing destination place would be to get up to Double Island Point and score that place, which is an unbelievable world-class dream wave that breaks really good, maybe 1 out of 100 days, rideable maybe 1 out of 20 days where it's okay. It's a great surfing destination, but it's very, very fickle. And when this project comes, I looked at it and I said, well, what a great vacation place for surfers, because they're going to score. You know that you're going to come to NOOSA with this, going to this particular spot, and you know you're going to score because you have a wave pool, and then you go off and you go do other things. You go to Hastings Street, go up to Double Island, but you try to score the points. You get a feel for it, but at least you have a basis, and you know that you have your bases covered when you go to a place like this, and it's the only one in the world. So it would be an absolute world leader in this way, with a new thought of surfing where you go with your mates, you know you're going to score, you're not really spending it. And maybe in a way it's a little bit like having an electric motor on your bicycle, because you know you're going to have a good time. You know you're going to get to that road and you're going to say, oh man, oh, this is up there. So you know it gives this safety net. So it actually has a realistic function to it. And I went down that. So I spent a week working on this, reading, going through the reports, talking to everybody, and as I try to explain my ideas of support, and really getting into it, and say, well, look, it fits in with the NOOSA plan in a way, because in the NOOSA plan it says we do not want to extract value from our natural resources. We want to leverage off of the natural resources, and that. The goal, overall economic plan of the NOOSA plan is exactly that, leveraging off our natural resources. And I thought that this wave pool house is ancillary to the overall experience in NOOSA. And as I voice my opinions of this, and really understand the plan and read through it a million times, that's when the cracks appeared to me in the reasoning of this, because first of all, when you say it's not extracting value from NOOSA, well, it actually is, because you're concreting over over an acre of land in the middle of a declared koala habitat. So you are extracting that. And then if you're going to go against staff's reports, you have to think, well, does it have a really benefit to the people? And then I think, well, the definition, in my philosophy that I went to the campaign with, the definition of good governance in NOOSA is based around raising the standard of living for the residents. And that is the magic, the incredibleness of what everybody has done here over the years, is raise our standard of living. And of course, in this case, does this particular wave pool raise the standard of living for us residents? Probably not, because I don't suspect any of us are actually going to make it into this wave pool to surf it the way it is on the paper right now. So I think that there's definitely two sides to that, and I wanted to express my attention to a lot of people that have been watching me on this, and to the fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Wigan. Any councillors wish to speak to this motion?
I'll speak to it.
Councillor Lawrence.
Okay. A development application's been made for a large 2-bedroom guest retreat and a wave pool on NOOSA's North Shore. The applicant's not proposing to open the retreat and wave pool up to the public. It will not be used for commercial purposes. It is not Wet and Wild. It is not Kelly Slater Wave Pool. It is not the wave pool in Yeppoon or the wave garden in Tullamarine Airport. It is a retreat and pool that will be built to scale. It will be built into the existing environment and it will have the smallest physical footprint. The retreat does not rely on excessive visitor numbers, which means there'll be minimal adverse environmental impacts from overuse. It's a 4,000 square metre wave pool that's similar in scale to dams that are found in the Noosa Shire. It'd be used solely by the owner and his family for 3 consecutive months of the year and rented out to private individuals, maximum 12 at a time, who are wanting to stay at the house and have exclusive use of the pool. The pool is integrated into the site. It's not visible from the beach. It's not visible from the road or by adjoining neighbours. It's proposed to operate only during the day. Only 4 people at a time can use the lagoon wave pool. The pumps and the blowers are to be located within a concrete structure under the hill slope, and the noise must comply with relevant acoustic standards. Now let's talk tourism and economy. To start, this is a world first and will attract media attention and media coverage, and big names in surfing and celebrities who love to surf. An exclusive getaway retreat that accommodates 12 people wanting an enhanced adventure destination and a world-class visitor experience, and who are prepared to pay big dollars for that experience. In fact, up to $20,000 a night for that experience. Did you know that Makepeace Island has a 500,000 litre pool, a 15-person spa, a gym and a tennis court? Did you know that Makepeace Island rates for peak season are listed at $18,000 a night for exclusive use, rising to $19,800 a night in peak season? Guests who spend $20,000 a night to stay at a retreat with a private lagoon wave pool are our high-end visitors. They eat at our restaurants, they drink at our bars, and they shop locally. They're proven to be consistent, repeat users. They also tell their friends who, like them, spend big. This is what our tourism NOOSA strategy refers to when they talk value over volume tourism product. Less people who spend big and help drive our economy. We have in front of us an opportunity to attract these value over volume tourists. Surfing is a $1 billion global industry. Everyone wants to try surfing and people are prepared to pay for the experience. I'm going to end by quoting Phil Jarrett, who recently wrote an article about the retreat and pool in the Noosa today. He said that he contacted his friend in France to ask about the wave pool located in Basque, which is comparative in scale and design to the North Shore proposal. This is what his friend said, quote, "You drive into the facility on a winding road through the Basque foothills. When you catch your first glimpse of the pool through the trees from above, it looks like a pristine lake or lagoon surrounded by lush green hills with an incredibly picturesque farmhouse perched on a small hill right above it. It's as idyllic as you can get. As for the experience itself, it's awesome. It reminded me of a great head-high day in the Maldives. As for the noise, maybe just a slight humming or swoosh as the waves get pushed out in the corner," unquote. This retreat and pool will be built to scale. It will be built into the existing environment and it will have the smallest physical footprint. With the correct and appropriate conditions of approval, we can address the red flags that were raised this morning. For example, lodgement of a vegetation plan that addresses the site's natural vegetation management values and identifies measures to minimise impacts during construction and operation on these values. Another condition, preparation of a water cycle management plan that addresses harvesting, wastewater treatment and disposal to minimise impacts on the site's vegetation, habitat and adjacent wetland. Installation of noise mitigation measures to ensure any potential noise impacts from the operation of the pool are appropriately managed and the amenity of the surrounding area is maintained. We have here an opportunity to support an application for a developer to underdevelop his property. We have an opportunity to be a world first and offer a world first class experience. This is our chance to help a man build his dream and deliver the unforgettable. This is our chance to attract our value over volume customer. For a development proposal, I don't think it gets better than this.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrenson. Councillor Stewart.
Is Councillor Lawrenson leaving an amended motion with those conditions?
Okay.
An alternate motion?
It depends.
If this motion was lost, she'd be moving an alternative.
It'll be a
This
negation
motion
of
was
this.
lost. I missed.
Okay, I'll speak to the motion then. I'll speak to this motion. I've had the opportunity to visit this site. I'm very pleased I did, besides getting a scratched car. It gave me additional insight into the area, the size and the scale of the project. I will agree that there are significant factors which Councillor Lawrenson has highlighted, and there should be further and significant conditions put on this proposal, specifically in regard to the noise, the clarification of the water treatment, the clarification of exact measures which the pool will be used to fill, and if we use any trucks, the impact upon those trucks. Also, the hydrologist report should be made available and obtained. I would suggest that this does fall under visit accommodation type 3 rural under the NOOSA new plan, and so it is consistent. The use of premises for short-term accommodation where accommodation has direct connection with the rural production, environmental or scenic values of the premises. The use includes a cabin park, guest house, retreat located in a rural setting and host farm offering rural experiences. I think this is a good example of a guest house, and it certainly could be deemed a surface retreat. The proposed house is a 2-bedroom house which will be able to sleep up to 12 people at once. It could be argued that the proposed build could fall under the category of a guest house, and indeed the word retreat would also lend itself to what is being discussed today. As I said, effectively we're looking at a surface retreat. The application in regard to visitor usage and residential usage is consistent with the zoning, and I believe that the experience provided will in fact provide a direct connection with the environment and scenic factors surrounding it, and thus would adhere to the definition. In the meeting last week, I asked about the opportunity cost, and I spoke again about that today. The opportunity cost is 6 cabins. It is hardly providing for a huge supply of visitor accommodation or being able to maximise the site to its full potential. In this aspect, I don't think the opportunity cost is significant, as we are currently looking at an alternative option of only 6 cabins versus 12 people. Page 17 refers to the fact that this proposal does not achieve the relevant outcomes of the NOOSA North Shore Locality Guide, because inclusion of a 4,000 square metre pool is not low key. The site is 14.85 hectares. The pool would take up 2.7% of the site. It cannot be seen from the road. It is a long drive in and it is completely hidden. It is large, but it is not unobtrusive, but it is unobtrusive in every sense of the word. I would consider it, in light of these facts, low key. In regard to the locality guide of the North Shore, within hundreds of metres away, we have a pub, an equestrian centre, high ropes course, and we have 48 houses directly next door, which are as big or bigger than the one dwelling that is being proposed today. No one wants to build a bridge to the North Shore, but there is infrastructure, and the infrastructure we're looking at here today is small in comparison to what else is currently there. In regard to the noise, now I think we need further information about the pumps, and I'd like to obtain further information about the exact noise levels. We don't have that available today. But there will be an absolute maximum of 12 people at this resort at one time, 4 in the pool at one time, all surfing. Across the road, as I said, we have a pub with a giant jumping pillow and playground for children. If you want to talk about noise, we need to go no further than that, as that is a benchmark for noise in the area. Without knowing the full impact of the noise associated with the pumps, I would suggest that a pool 200 metres or 250 metres from its closest neighbour, a fair drive in from the road and hidden among the bushland, would by all accounts be far less noisy than the pub with a focus on outdoor activities for children. I received an email today that said, and I think we all received it, by a member of our community, you have all been elected to, and it said, you have all been elected to protect our area, and this would be such a betrayal of your positions. What would be a betrayal of my position would be that if I listened to only specific groups with a certain minded, who are of a certain mind, rather than the whole of the Shire. I need to look at the community benefit as a whole, the impact on our community. It can be argued that this is a private retreat, it's not open to the public, but then so too is Makepeace Island, as Councillor Lawrenson has adhered to. And the community had no problem approving that. In fact, it is spoken of highly. What is being proposed today is nowhere near the infrastructure, the impact, or the development of Makepeace Island. It too is a private resort. I need to think about the jobs that this will bring, the tourism it will create, the money it will put into our local economy through tourism, the jobs associated with the projects, not just the builders, but the labourers, the electricians, the cooks, the caterers, the cleaners and the gardeners and the landscapers. These jobs will be ongoing. This proposal will inject millions into our local economy at a time when our shire needs it more than ever before.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillors, at the risk of keeping everyone in suspension, I need to call a short adjournment.
Toilet break.
Thank you. Yep.
Start and produce the note. All good?
Right, thank you.
Back on?
Thank you, councillors.
You made it.
We're back. Meeting's open again, and
Frank's smiling.
yeah. So far, we've had Councillor Stockwell, Councillor Wegener, Councillor Lawrence, and Councillor Stewart have spoken to the motion. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, right.
Councillor Jelicevic.
Look, I appreciate the passion with which all councillors are speaking towards this wave pool proposal. I too see a value in this. I think it's the type of tourism facility that we could house here in NOOSA. High value, low volume tourism experience in keeping with what Tourism NOOSA is trying to achieve. Yes, it could generate some real dollars, and yes, there will be the type of entities across the world that would come here to seek an experience in a private estate to have that function. Councillor Stockwell alluded to the surfing culture, but Councillor Wegner clarified that. I mean, surfers will go anywhere for an ideal wave, and if an ideal wave is being produced by any means, they'll relish the opportunity. So, for a first class facility that a world class surfer would have a unique experience for an Olympic sport, I can see why councillors are excited at the prospect of something like this being in our local region. Councillor Stockwell alluded to a tennis court as being a high impact sports facility that wouldn't be allowed on the North Shore, but I don't know that a tennis court in itself would be a high impact sports facility, so I thought that was a bit of a little bit of a stretch.
I was quoting
there, particularly when there are already two tennis courts and other facilities over there. So I don't think the impacts are there. And the prospect of no further subdivisions. Well, this isn't a further subdivision. This is a subdivision that's already been approved and allowed. So some of the challenging quotes there, and of course, Councillor Stewart alluded to the pub, the high roads, etc., and the impact that's already over there. But as Councillor Stockwell alluded to, the plan going forward is to limit that. We've had the desire for resorts and airports and high impact activities over there, and it's all been scaled back over the years by the desire of this community to see that area maintained and kept pristine. We've heard some new information today about how the pool may be filled with buns being put on site, and with regard to whether the trees are glossy black habitats, and nobody actually clear on how many trees are within the footprint of the pool may be impacted, and what's there. So, based on what's before us today, I can't approve this. There's no way that the environmental impact is well enough understood by the information that's been supplied to date. I see great value, and I think a facility like this somewhere else in the Shire would certainly be something that we would be able to approve, because it would fit in with that. But given the environmental constraints on this site, and given the report from staff with regard to the challenges those environmental constraints have on this site, I can't support the application as it stands and with the information before us. But I credit an opportunity like this within our Shire somewhere for the experience of all surfers that would come here and relish that opportunity as a high value, low volume tourist experience.
If I could just follow on from that, I too do see the value of this as a high value, low volume tourism experience. It is consistent with what the NOOSA Council and Tourism NOOSA have been trying to achieve. The question for me is whether this is the appropriate site for such a facility. High value and over volume tourism is the mantra, but not at the expense of environmental values. And in this case, there seems to be too high a price to pay. I also believe I'm reluctant to support a 4,000 square metre wave pool in this location when there are so few design details available for assessment as yet. I think it would be imprudent to approve this application when we know so little about what is actually going to occur on the site, especially in regard to how the large volume of water is going to be treated. We've just heard today that the volume of water is going to be actually twice what was anticipated in the report, at about 5.7 million litres as opposed to 3 million litres. We don't know whether it's going to be chlorinated water or ionised water. We've also learned today that there's going to be a bund feeding a dam that will collect water runoff on the site and treat it there. But again, we don't know what process is going to be involved and whether there's going to be any flow-on effects to the surrounding environment. We also, what we're also being asked to do is place a wave pool, a mechanical wave pool, on land which we know is 1.3 hectares, at least a hectare or more of threatened species habitat in an area we now know is declared as koala priority and habitat area, in a precinct which for many decades has been strategically preserved for nature-based recreation experiences. It's fair to say 98% of all development applications are approved by NOOSA Council. In this case, there appears to be no overwhelming public benefit that would justify approving this application on this location, despite the many conflicts with the superseded and even the current planning scheme. Perhaps in the future there may be an application on a more appropriate site that we could consider, but as things stand, with the lack of information and what the cost would be in terms of environment, I cannot in all conscience support this application. I support the motion. Councillor Stockwell, do you wish to close?
I do. I think there's been a range of very valuable insights into this development, and I actually changed my mind. I actually thought it was the wrong development for the Shire to start with, but for the reasons that Councillor Lawrenson outlined, I do think it is probably a potential to be the right development. We have got a local homegrown developer who has developed a very boutique resort concept, and as Councillor Wagner pointed out, it's new technology, just like electric bikes. There's a new way to experience surfing, and the scale and technology is such that a boutique resort may work somewhere in the Shire. But as I think the heart of the argument is, it has to be the right development in the right location. We have to have, to me, the issues about how it's operate is secondary to making that decision, and to me I can't get to that point where I believe this is the right location. It is a high conservation value area and it isn't consistent with the long-term planning objectives. I do think that when considering this application, our role in development control is a statutory role, and I have to draw attention that Councillor Stewart may have an opinion of what a definition is, but we must be guided by a professional staff about what the planning definition of the application in front of us. It's clearly, one aspect is a dwelling house. The other is an amusement of some scale or activity, amusement and recreation, whatever it's called. It is not up for us to councillors to redefine to suit our argument. It's up to us to apply the planning scheme, to take on professional advice, and to assess that advice in accordance with that planning scheme. And on that basis, there is only one right way to vote, in my opinion, and that is to approve the motion in front of us.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Councillor Wegener, Stockwell, Juricevic and Wilkie. Against? Councillor Stewart and Councillor Lawrenson. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Connor. We move on to the next item, which is item 2, the Climate Change Response Plan. Welcome Anne and welcome Kim.
I just asked Kim at the very beginning just to outline, we were planning on having a couple of other reports for this round of meetings as well about the climate, the CHAP, Coastal Hazards Adaptation Plan, and other issues associated with the plan scheme. Maybe just outline where we're up to, how this particular report deals with the overall climate change response, and how those three issues fit in, and where the others are coming.
Yep, thanks, Fred. Councillors, as you know, we've spent the last couple of months briefing you on the range of projects we're doing around in response to climate change. The report you have in front of you today is one of 3 reports that you'll get over the next couple of months. So today's report is provides you with a project brief and scope for the development of a climate response plan and associated community engagement plan. So it's the start of a process. What we're doing is asking you to consider the brief, the scope, the process, and how we'll go about developing that plan, which is a Shire-wide response plan to all the issues and impacts of climate change for our Shire across a whole range of settings, sectors, and environments. So that's today's report. As you know, we are also working on the the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Plan, which is specifically looking at the hazards associated with our coastal environments and the increase of the effects of those on our environment, both in terms of storm tide, inundation, storm surge, sea level rise, so in our coastal environments. That chat we've been working on now for a couple of years, and we're coming to the finalisation of that for the purposes of community engagement, and we hope that'll come to you next month. Associated with that, as you know, the Minister for Planning put a condition on the sign-off of the NOOSA plan, which related to completing the CHAP, so the Coastal Hazards Plan, which we'll get next month, completing that so that then we could do associated amendments to the scheme to those environments, so looking at sort of development controls and regulation around those environments that might be impacted by coastal hazards. And importantly, that the chat would provide the evidence base for us to integrate the state planning policy related to natural hazards. So that you'll also get a report around an associated planning scheme amendment from the chat next month. So today's simply about, not simply, very importantly, but it is about a project scope and plan and process and associated proposed community engagement process to develop a climate response plan for the whole of the Shire.
Kim, can I ask just right at the front, the council's also been working on a climate change adaptation plan for some time now.
Yes.
Could you explain the difference between a climate change response plan and a climate change adaptation plan, and why we need this response plan?
Yeah. So this plan takes into account the climate change adaptation plan. So what we're doing is bringing together both climate change adaptation planning and also climate mitigation planning. So we've got a Zen organisation strategy which looks to mitigate emissions associated with our own organisation. We've also got an environment strategy now that puts in place a target to help the community mitigate their emissions. So this response plan looks at both mitigation and adaptation around climate change. So it's an integrated process which draws together all of those things under sort of one umbrella.
So the adaptation plan is less all-encompassing than the response plan?
That's correct. And the adaptation plan will now form part of the response plan.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just Kim, on the Planning Environment Committee meeting agenda, page 53, project assumptions. The plan will be prepared in-house with some assistance from specialist consultants where needed and where budget allows. Do we know who those specialist consultants are yet?
No, we don't.
All right.
Yeah.
That answers
we
that
don't.
question.
No, we don't. So, you know, like I said,
could you be more clear?
Councillor Stewart, we are, and you feel free to jump in here, but you know, this is the start of the process. So we're in the stage of sort of identifying all the issues and starting to connect with stakeholders. So as those things come out, we need to delve deeper into a few issues. That's when we might need to draw on specialist consultants around particular issues, whether it might be waste or landfill or, quite targeted issues.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
On page 51, Kim, there's just reference being made to the 2018 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report and regional climate projections published by the IPCC in 2013. Are we relying on any more current data? Has the IPCC released anything more current than 2018 and 2013? That's my first question. Sorry,
Yeah, no, the IPCC specifically hasn't released its standard reports. The last one was that 2018. They have actually done some other interim reports looking at specific issues, but they're the ones that we've been mainly relying on, and they're currently working on the next report, which I believe is 2021 or 22.
It's 2021. It's the 6 assessment report,
That's
AR6.
correct, yes.
Should we not wait for completion of that report so we have more relevant or more up-to-date information to base our projections on?
The IPCC report will look at pretty much they'll look at the global situation.
Yep.
There has been continual reports coming out from the World Meteorological Organisation, from the Australian Meteorological Organisation, and what the IPCC does, it takes a whole lot of reports and basically synthesises them.
Yep.
So it's not as though there hasn't been any research or any further studies that has since that last IPCC report. All of the reports that are coming out from all of those various organisations are still basically saying that the trajectory for greenhouse gas emissions and for the impacts of climate change are still going in the direction that we knew from this report, and in fact the greenhouse gases are increasing, and we are seeing more and more impacts of climate change throughout. So what this report that is to you today is really to develop NOOSA's plan to respond to all of the information that we know going ahead from previous reports, and also still to keep to take into account all the scientific information that is coming out, which will continue to come out.
Yep.
So I think it's very, very timely that NOOSA is actually putting together its own climate response plan that is looking at both mitigation and adaptation because of all the information that we all currently already know. It's going forward.
There's also reference on page 51 that states by the year 2070. Will Council be doing projections and planning for climate change adaptation and mitigation for what period of time in the future? Can you give me an idea of timelines? Our projections 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060, 2070? Can you give me answer that question?
In terms of the adaptation modelling?
Yeah, so we've, at the moment we're doing our timeframes are 2040, 2070 and 2100. That's what our modelling, part of our modelling is based on. But like Amy said, there's numerous reports that inform the work we do. We have a overarching policy, a climate change response policy that the organisation's adopted, council's adopted, that says, when there's any change in that data or new reports from the IPCC, that we'll review our planning. So there's some triggers in our governance already to review our planning. So if for instance new data came out and that report said something quite different, it would trigger a review of our planning.
And that would be the basis of it.
That's right.
If it's significantly different from the information going forward, we then have to take stock of where we sit.
Yes, that's in our overarching policy that governs this approach.
I remember us putting it in there.
Yeah.
Got a few more questions. Are we going to employ the same interventions on residents who are directly impacted in bushfire zones and flood zones as we're going to be imposing on residents impacted in coastal erosion zones?
I think when we get down to that level, that'll be at the sort of chap level, when we get down to individual sites. This one is more overarching in a policy sense in terms of how we're going to respond to climate change.
So wait.
Yeah,
Okay.
My advice on that one would be to wait till we get down to that next level.
Okay. On page 62, so looking at the stakeholder consultation groups, this is just a suggestion. I think it's worthwhile to add maybe a high impact group. So we need to recognise or separate stakeholders with high levels of influence or interest, like coastal community groups, private property owners. And I think, and this again just a suggestion, is that they will require more communication and collaboration as opposed to consultant form than stakeholders with lower levels of interest. Again, just a recommendation.
Yeah.
Do you agree with?
Yeah, sure. Councillor Stewart made a similar comment at the planning committee.
Okay.
So this community engagement plan is not supposed to be fixed in stone.
Okay.
It's a plan to guide the process.
Great.
But yeah, it is somewhat dynamic, and our intention is that both those who are high impact, high interest, as many people as we can and key stakeholders can be engaged in this process. So
and the engagement will take the form of a collaboration with these high impacted residents as opposed to those with lower levels. Are we going to change that level of engagement, Kim?
Yeah, there'll be various levels of engagement depending on the nature of the stakeholder and the nature of the issue, absolutely across the whole spectrum.
Yep.
So yeah, I think there's room to take on board that suggestion, absolutely, Councillor Lawrenson.
Can I just follow up on that?
Yeah, sure.
So when I look at the engagement, I read on, page 61, I look at the CCRP and its community engagement outcomes will seek to, and I see it falling quite short in terms of when we look at our IAP2 spectrum, the outcomes don't go to collaboration nor to empowerment of the community. So is that deliberate, or is that just something in the drafting of this document that I've missed the right section?
By empowerment, what do you mean?
Well, the IAP2...
Responding to climate change.
No, well, the IAP2 spectrum, which is the, is the way public engagement spectrum. And it goes from inform, and I see that in the outcomes. I see consult, I can see that. I can see involve. I can't see to collaborate, to partner with the public in each aspect of the decision, including the development of alternatives and the identification of the preferred solution. And I can't see in those outcomes anything to do with empower, which is to place the final decision making in the hands of the public. I think, in my view, a climate change response plan that doesn't collaborate and empower the community to take action and be involved in the decision won't be that effective.
Well, we might be in the realm of debate here, Councillor, because I mean, the decision to build a rock wall or not is not, we're not going to, it will ultimately rest with the council.
So my question was, so I was just clarifying there, my question was, are those have I, by honing in on the outcomes, have I missed out other places where you have gone into detail of how we're going to collaborate and endeavour to empower, or is that something that the project plan needs to have a think about?
Yeah, certainly in terms of the overall project plan, I mean, it very much is in that development stage at the moment. So this is very much that plan to continue the plan, I guess. And so what is before you is to outline sort of the processes that we would do in consultation and involvement with the community to develop that plan, and then the next ongoing steps, which are going to be much more granular and specific about particular outcomes, would obviously go through to that level.
So what will come out of this is a overarching plan that council would endorse, and then an action plan, potentially a 5-year action plan that could have a range of actions that are absolutely about collaborating, empowering. It's going to have to. This is a community-based council partnership plan, I guess, where it's going to require a whole lot of community action and empowerment.
Well, require understanding by the community the impacts across the range of community impacts. You know, so someone what as I think Amelia alluded to earlier, not just coastal impact, but river, flooding, fire impacts, and all of those. So the potential for impact across the Shire is
Yes, huge.
Yeah.
So bearing in mind what Councillor Stockwell's just said and what's been acknowledged, is there scope to amend that wording on page 61 to include the words empower? Is that what
I might have a think about it for Thursday night.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
okay.
And on page 62, Kim, again, can we perhaps add, under stakeholder engagement, identify negotiable and non-negotiable elements? I think it's important that we actually specify what aspects can be influenced by stakeholders and what can't, so that, again, there's no false expectation. If we're going to engage in genuine, meaningful community engagement, I think that's got to be decided right from the onset. What's negotiable, what's not. Let's not waste anyone's time.
Sure.
Any further questions, councillors? Anyone care to move the recommendation? Councillor Tom.
I'll move the recommendation.
Move Councillor Wegener, seconded
second
Councillor Stockwell. Councillor Wegener, you wish to speak to the motion?
No.
Okay. Other councillors wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Stewart.
I note in this meeting we are approving a plan, and that plan very clearly outlines community and stakeholder engagement. specifically on page 66, and we talked about this on the P&E agenda. The people who are deemed high impact, high level of interest include property owners in coastal hazard areas. As I alluded to in the P&E meeting, they had not been noted or written down as key stakeholders for targeted consultation under households and communities on page 62 of the agenda. I have, however, been assured by staff in the Planning and Environment Committee meeting that these people will be included as key stakeholders targeted for community consultation, and this is very much a moving document. Similarly, I also raised the necessity to include all surf clubs affected, which would include the Peregian Beach Surf Club, the Sunshine Beach Surf Club, and the NOOSA Head Surf Club, as part of the key stakeholders providing consultation and feedback. Again, I was assured that anyone who needs to be consulted will be, so I acknowledge that I am satisfied with council staff's support of engaging all those who need to be engaged will in fact be. And this will no doubt include the groups that I've just made mention of. It is critical that those most affected have an opportunity to engage, to provide feedback and to have their voices heard. And as I think Councillor Stockwell mentioned in the P&E meeting and Councillor Lawrenson today, that includes the bushfire, people affected by bushfires, floods, things like that. So I'm satisfied with the inclusion of these groups, and I support the staff's recommendation and community stakeholder engagement plan.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Lawrenson.
I hope that we don't overstep our role and responsibility in planning and preparing for the impacts of climate change. I understand our immediate threats of bushfires, drought and flooding. And no one needs to be reminded that nearly 12 months ago, nearly all of Peregian disappeared because of bushfires that scientists said was caused by climate change. In these situations, we must respond and determine appropriate interventions to build resilience and mitigate risk. But future threats such as coastal erosion, I believe we must respond to differently. We've got time to develop plans with directly impacted residents and communities. We've got time to budget and we've got time to explore solutions. We built rock walls in the past, so who knows what technology is going to be available in 30 or 40, 50 years' time to stop us from losing our beaches and some of us from losing our homes. It's for this reason that I'd like to put on record that Council should only be addressing climate change impacts that have a high probability of occurring in the foreseeable future. Any projections beyond 10 years, in my opinion, should be the concern of future councils as these threats become more foreseeable. A priority list of threats based on recent events should be made. The top of the list is bushfire zones, then flood zones, all based on recent events, all based on the most up-to-date data. If we're serious about climate change, then this is what I believe this council must do. We can't stop the occurrence of natural events, but we can adapt and mitigate the risk by taking appropriate action to climate change impacts that have a high probability of occurring in the foreseeable future. Bushfires, droughts, and the real threat, flooding.
Question, is this plan intended to take into account impacts in the short, medium and long term?
The current plan, what's on the table today, is to actually develop that plan. So what will come out of that plan is what the community and the consultation comes out from the community. So we will come back to council with a full plan that has been developed in consultation with the community, which will, I can't say what's actually in there, but I would imagine that it would take into consideration short-term, medium and long-term considerations.
I'll add an element of a question to that, if I may, to follow on from that. I mean, it's, taking in Amelia's comments there, the likelihood and the level of impact are likely to change over time, and so those impacts are likely to be far more recognisable and greater understood the closer they are likely to occur. So I mean, you know, the plan will obviously have to be a moving feast to some degree to adapt as the hazards worsen over time, if in fact that is what occurs.
And part of the background work actually has been to look at risk assessments, to actually do risk assessments based on those timeframes and consider the modelling that is actually directing what those likely outcomes and impacts will be.
Councillor Stockwell?
Yeah. There was an interesting proposition, and yes, we should be focusing on the highly probable, but definitely not should we be taking a short-term view. 12 years ago, Professor Ross Garnaut put down on the information available to him that the summer of 1920 was the first time that the climate change models were suggesting that we'd have extreme bushfire risk across eastern Australia. 12 years ago it was predicted. 2010, emergency services were talking in the first climate action workshop that we held in Pomona, and they said that the biggest threat that they can see is the increased bushfire risk, not down the coast, but on the steeply sloping hills in the hinterland. This issue is only as severe and has only reached crisis point because politicians at every level failed to plan for the long term. It is an ultimate failure of the Western democratic system that we are in a crisis that has resulted in the current impacts. The current impacts include significantly increased mental health issues for our teenagers and young people as a result of their inability to perceive a prosperous future for themselves in the current global context. And I don't believe that's the only thing. The health and well-being aspects which are honest now across the globe, the increased number of deaths from heat waves, and with our ageing population, that's a significant adaptation issue. Now, some of the solutions to that are simple things like making our urban environments and places go more shady. It takes more than 10 years for a tree to get up and provide that change. So all those issues have to be considered in the long term. It's about vector-borne diseases which are in council control, and health and wellbeing has clearly said that with the increased storms, increased temperatures, that our vectors like mozzies on the salt plains or the vectors that lead to Ross River fever are likely to get worse, and therefore we're going to have more public health issues to consider. So it's not just the big ticket issues about houses falling into the beach or more frequent flooding. It's about the pervasive impacts across our community that this plan has to address. And to me, it is already 20 years too late. And so I urge councils to not consider this something that we can just knock down the road a bit. I know there's a lot of controversy about declaring the emergency, but for someone who's studied this since the late 1980s, it is crunch time. What follows next, if we have inaction at the three levels of government, is not something any of us would like to see for our children. So we should be bold and we should work through this plan and be honest and be authentic in our discussions and make sure that we do what we can in our area to achieve an outcome that's better than if we had no plan at all.
Okay. Councillor Jurisic.
Yeah, I concur with the thoughts of Councillor Stockwell there. It's not just man-made structure that we've got to consider. I mean, the impacts here could be not only of floods, I mean, and of fires, but floods are usually the result of storms. And I mean, if the changes that are occurring to be believed, we'll have increased cyclone activity here. That could have a decimating effect on forests and the like with wipeouts. We've seen it to the north where forests have been decimated, which has an effect on all of our ecology and all of the native flora and fauna that we hold so dear. The changes of temperature rise could completely change the ecology of the area. The trees that we see now may not be the bushland that we see now may actually transition and change to a different style, which we have already spoken about as a result of the impacts of the Perugian fires. So yeah, there's a lot to consider here and a lot to get your head around, but without proper planning, without forethought into the long-term, the short-term future and the medium and long-term future needs to be at the forefront of our thinking and our planning. So I see that we need to look at the entire effect and the entire impact going forward. And I think this plan is a great start. It's the next stepping stone in the process of going through this whole ordeal that we face. So that's it.
Yeah, look, I like to flag that I wouldn't hate to see anything that would limit this sort of planning to the short term. I think it has to take into account the short, medium and long term impacts of climate change to ensure that our community is well placed, not only now but well into the future, to be more resilient socially, economically and environmentally in the face of inevitable climate change, which is already well underway, and perhaps we're taking steps too late. In one sense, we're already playing catch up in many senses, and I think it's a great plan. I appreciate what you're seeking to do here is pull together all the many different aspects of the work that the NOOSA Council has already done in this space, and those steps include ensuring future flood and fire hazard risks were recognised via amendments to the former NOOSA plan and in the new NOOSA plan through more robust development requirements, committing in 2016 to taking meaningful action towards more environmentally and financially responsible future by setting a zero emissions target for council operations, in 2017 becoming the first in Queensland, among the first in Queensland funded by the state to develop a climate change adaptation plan and a coastal hazards adaptation plan, 2017 being the first in Queensland to endorse the zero emissions NOOSA strategy with actions to achieve net zero emissions for council operations by 2026, 2017 joining the city's power partnership, which shares knowledge to help communities join the global shift towards a more financially and environmentally viable future. In December 2017, endorsing a climate change response policy which guides council decision making and ongoing capacity building and climate response. And in June 2019, after extensive community consultation, adopting the environment strategy with actions to help the broader Noosa Shire achieve zero emissions targets. It's a very ambitious project and I commend you for it. Thank you. Councillor Wiggin, you wish to close?
Or close, yeah. A part of our identity as Noosians, people that live in Noosa, is the confidence that we're going forward and addressing climate change problems now. We address problems in the distant past, which we are enjoying today, far more than 10 years ago, back in the 60s, the problems that they confronted with sand mining, so forth, national park. We are enjoying the benefits of the forethought that they had back then, and that has become a part of our culture. And I'm hoping that with the kids and with the work that Dahlia is doing with the eHub, we can instill a sense of peace of mind to our kids that we actually are doing something. We're not helpless in this world, and as residents of Noosa, we are far from helpless. We actually are leading the world and engender that and reestablish that culture within our community from the little kids all the way up. And then we make evidence-based decisions, and that's really important, that we step back, get the information that we want to do the research that we do very well. For example, to bring back the fish, it's going to be 10 years, at least 10 years before you begin to get the results of what is going on now, but that's what the planning is for. And I think it goes back to our community, our identity, our community involvement. So I commend what you're doing with this plan because it fits so nicely in with why I wanted to run for NOOSA Council in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor Wiggin. Put the motion, those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We now have got item 4, referred from the Services and Organisation Committee, the Operational Plan Progress Report.
Now we have the appeal first.
Oh, beg your pardon, I'm sorry. Item 3, Planning and Environment Court Appeal number D102 of 220, refusal of ancillary dwelling unit 133 Gateway Drive, NOOSAVILLE, referred for further consideration. Hello, Kerry. Questions for Kerry? Councillor Lawrence, you wanted to say referred, didn't you?
No, I'd requested some further information on the matter which I received, and I'm happy to move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, can we have move Councillor Stockwell, seconded Councillor Juricevic. Any councillors wish to speak to the motion?
I'll speak to it.
Yeah.
Thank you for moving the matter to the general meeting. I requested the further information which I received. I will support the recommendation to defend the appeal so that both parties can begin the mediation process and hopefully reach a negotiated agreement. It's my opinion that there does exist an opportunity for the applicant to review his proposal and resubmit for council approval.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, Kerry. Now, item 4, Operational Plan Progress Report, fourth quarter.
It was 9 and 10 on the original agenda, wasn't it?
Yes, that was
Next two.
item 9 on page 73 of the Services and Organisation Committee agenda. Councillors, I've referred this because in the past, this is often at the General Committee. It's often a report direct to General Committee, and it involves KPIs across the whole of the organisation that should be of interest to all councillors. So.
Nice to see the CEO ahead of the time frame.
Yeah.
Well, the reason happened was the report was done while I was on holidays.
Yes.
That's why it was done on time.
A more efficient CEO, is that what we're saying, Mr. CEO?
Yes. Both of these next two reports, the operational report and the annual report, she put together for me while I was away, and she did a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take any questions or make any comments.
I have a question.
Sure.
Just looking at the quarter 4, April to June 2020, we're behind schedule on 7 initiatives and on track for 8. Comparing that to all the other quarters where we're doing so well and we're so much more on track than behind schedule, can you just talk me through that this quarter?
So the ones I've listed out just below that table actually in the report, the 7 that are behind. 2 of those were on track earlier the year, and they are the Pigeon Beach Community House and the next stage of the Digital Hub.
Okay.
Both of those have now been delayed due to the contractor going into liquidation, so that pushed those 2 back. Similarly, the NOOSA River Management Plan was on track early last year when things were tracking along. I don't think we got our community consultation as well as we could have as we went through that Christmas period, so rather than trying to push that through prior to the election, we held that one back, and we're better off being a bit late and right than early and wrong. So those are the main 2. The other one's the placemaking team. Similarly, that was always intended to only be looked at once the planning scheme was adopted, and because they're going to be the same staff, or some of the same staff working on that, and we didn't get the planning scheme adopted until last month, so again that one's been pushed back a bit. They're the main ones.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, there was one more. The other one's the revenue diversification project.
I was going to go there, thank you.
This is one that is a direct result of COVID. The team we've been working at, looking at how we can, as the name suggests, diversify revenue, getting revenue from commercial or quasi-commercial type avenues that will take pressure off our rates. We've got a team that's been working on some ideas around that. And they're the same people who have been heavily involved with having to deal with the budget implications of COVID and what that means and how we have to model up all our different future scenarios. So that basically hasn't been a priority for that group until we get through all the COVID stuff. And once that's a bit more under control, they'll come back and start working on that again. That's the direct impact.
Mr. CEO, can I ask you about an item on page 81, which is the development of community sustainability indicators? They're a bit behind schedule.
Yep.
Double-barrel question. Could you sort of flesh out what these community sustainability, an example of what a community sustainability indicator is? And also, you've mentioned it'll be part of the development of a community plan. We normally operate under a corporate plan. Could you just flesh out a bit about the difference between a community plan and a corporate plan? What sort of opportunities that may provide?
Sure. Maybe I'll talk a bit about what a community sustainability indicator is first. We have organisational KPIs, from workplace health and safety to financial. That's about us as a council. A community sustainability indicator is really what is a way of measuring how our community is going. We have some in place at the moment, but not in an integrated way. We have some around, I'll pick some environment, what's the rating of the river? Is it an A-rated river, or which way is that going? We might have some around the economy, what's our unemployment rate compared to the state average and how that's going. We might have some around our community indicators, what's the level of community engagement in terms of participation in volunteer groups, what's our volunteer rate? Is it above the state average, or what's the trend over time? We don't have those in any coordinated way at the moment to have a look at a holistic view about how our community is tracking over time. And that's what this piece of work is designed to do, is to look at, compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, what are our long-term trends about how we're going as a community? We've actually put that on hold because in the cycle of where we are with the election cycle, it always makes sense to look at where are we going over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Fairly soon after election, you've got a new council come on board, and what's the process to do that? We've currently been using a corporate plan process, which is really about, if we use this terminology, a corporate plan is about the council's plan for the community. I'll be coming to you sometime in the next few weeks or months when we get to it, looking at going down a community plan process. A community plan process is what's the community plan for the community, and it's a subtle difference. And it was originally a statutory requirement for every council in Queensland to have a community plan, and that was going probably from around about 2008 or 9 up until about 2012 or 13. It was every council had to have a community plan or work with the community to develop that. But they changed the legislation, and what I'll be suggesting to councillors, I think even though it's not a legislative requirement, that's actually a pretty good way of looking at things. How do you go through a process to develop a long-term vision for NOOSA, involving the community on that journey, so it's a community's plan for the community, not the council's plan for the community. And then how would you track how you're going on that process? So in 5 years' time, how would we know if we're on track to where we want to get to? What's an integrated set of sustainability indicators that will tell us where we're on track to do that, around the triple bottom line of community, economy, environment, and so on. So that's probably a long answer to a short question, but it's a way which I'll be coming back to give some council advice about how I think we get to that next stage of the fun part of being a councillor, which is looking at the long-term vision and how do we flesh that out.
Thank you. Thank you. Tom.
Well, it actually sounds like the Bhutan and the economics of happiness, what we're looking at here. So we might already have a framework to begin with.
How happy is everyone?
Yeah, well, I think that's really important, That's
I think this process
Before a meeting and after a meeting.
By the end of the process, I'll have a 10-day silent meditation retreat. Just watch out.
Great. I don't really.
I'll
Days on blind, not lasting.
The economic
challenge between you and me, Alex, who lasts the shortest.
I'll say that election competition. If there's no more questions, I'll
Claire's moving the motion. Have a second,
I'll
please.
second.
Councillor Juricevic. Any councillors to speak to the motion?
I'll just quickly speak.
Yeah.
I just want to commend staff. Look, there are 32 initiatives in the 2019-20 operational plan. To suffice to say, there's a lot going on. And council staff should be commended on this. On top of this, we have 43 projects underway across the Shire, which are infrastructure projects, largely due to the grants we've received from the federal and state governments. So this is a significant workload for many of our departments, along with the operational plans. So I just want to commend staff on all the hard work they're doing, and thank the CEO.
Well said. I just have one more question.
Right.
On page 84, the KPI graph for number of planning applications decided within statutory time frame, the graph, top right hand of that page, does that indicate a blowout in times, and is that related in any way to a surge in applications prior to the introduction of the new planning scheme?
Now, if you have a look at the graph, the blue elements are those that are a bit behind or not decided in time. The green ones are fine. The main areas that are causing a little bit of grief at the moment are material change in use. And part of the reason that they, and they have been traditionally a little bit behind, is that they're the more complex applications. Often they don't meet the planning scheme, need more information, bounce back and forward, and get a bit more. The one that's a bit unusual, it's not normally in this space for the these applications, is the operational works vegetation.
Yeah.
So they're normally ones which should be pretty fast. They're a little bit behind at the moment. So that's why that blue line in the total looks a lot higher than it normally would.
Thank you. Sorry, Joe.
I'll just as the Mayor stated, I'll commend the staff on their work to date and through the challenging environment to achieve what we've achieved through the fourth quarter. It's lovely to hear the new councillors on board and acknowledging the work of the previous council and the staff in heading forward in achieving our progress.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? The motion, those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next item up is the year in review, also referred for the significance of the issue.
Should that be the year in review?
And that's
Oh, no.
item 10 of page 87 of the Services and Organisations Committee agenda.
I wouldn't mind sort of maybe just echoing the words the Mayor previously on the previous report. Then you get tired reading this report. There's so much that's going on, and had a big year, with fires and elections and COVID. It's been an unusual year, and I really can't speak more highly of the staff in our organisation for what they have done. Every one of them, above and beyond is the way I describe in the report that to get to where we've had to with such trying circumstances over the last 12 months, it's been an awesome effort, and we're very privileged to have such good staff here.
Councillor Stockwell, you referred this item for consideration, I understand.
I did.
Do you wish to speak to it?
Well, it hasn't moved it yet.
I'll move it then.
Move it.
I'll second it.
Seconded, Councillor Stewart.
Look, I think it's important to be here because it is important after a full year's of activity to step back and say what has been achieved.
What just happened?
Yeah. And for the first 9 months, it was extremely busy, and then it got busier. But we still have, when you look at the top 10 highlights of 2019 and 20, we can still say to our community, look, these are all significant issues that have been resolved in a year. Whether it's from the North Shore, NOOSA North Shore beach campground, where we've significant upgrade. We've had relationships with Landcare where they've gone and used their trainees and to go and revegetate and take out the weeds and to make it a far more sustainable holiday destination. To the success of the loot bus during Christmas time, around going round and round, the first time we've been able to achieve that. Right the way through to the COVID response, which we heard that our business roundtable, we have the Queensland Small Business Commissioner sitting in, because it's a model that the state says is really valuable to get that real-time information up to the highest levels of government to ensure that the response is as effective and as quick as possible. So, as the CEO has said, we have a lot to thank for a highly motivated, highly committed and reasonably tired staff at the moment. And so I suppose that's the other thing, is we also as councillors have to realise that while after a new election we've got lots of great ideas, that we have to be mindful that the long-term success of this organisation is about maintaining the productivity of our staff and make sure that they do have time to relax and do have time to go on holidays, and that we head off in a new direction, refreshed and invigorated.
Councillor Tom.
Just a thought, obviously on Thursday night, this will be the last thing on the agenda. Perhaps, be as a year in review, pop a bottle. And but also,
Why wait for a year?
But obviously, that like we're saying, that the staff has been such involvement, and if there's any way, through the week to echo what we're saying, we're talking amongst ourselves here, but to get that word out to the staff.
Yes. Good call. Joe.
Yeah, what a year it's been, but it's I said it's wonderful reading through this about the achievements of council, not only for 1 year, but when I see things like I'm heartened to be reminded that the water rebates that we give to community organisations of nearly $87,000 and more continues to get highlighted in the fact that we spend $170,000 on our sports fields and the like. The water rebates of particular interest to me, because it's one that I brought to council, and I'm glad to see that we continue to support our community groups with things like year in, year out, not just in 1 year. As been in the past, but also the achievements of where our economic grants program goes to, and the volunteer organisations that we support, and the outcomes of the plan, and all the other areas of council. I mean, there are so many, and such a vast array of elements that are undertaken. Even looking down to the visitor numbers within the library, the physical items that have been done, the number of bin collections, and the level of street sweeping, the number of development applications that go through, and the level of achievement of approvals at 94%. Only 30 refusals in the last year. A reminder that there's 10,724 kilometres worth of roads being swept by the street sweeper in a year. I think some of these statistics are wonderful to see and read, to realise the level of service and the length of effort that council goes to deliver for our community.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, it has been a challenging year, as our CEO said when we first came in. Major bushfires, completion of the planning scheme, an election, COVID, and a new council, and transition of a new council. I'd like to congratulate the CEO and council staff. It has been no doubt a year like no other. I'd also like to acknowledge and congratulate the former council, because many of these initiatives were obviously done before the new council came in. And as we move from Revive into Thrive as part of our COVID economic recovery, I'd just like to acknowledge that we as a council will continue to do all we can to support our community going forward.
Any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? Wish to close, Brian? Put the motion. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Next item is report direct to the General Committee, the Budget Review BR1 for the 2021 financial year. Welcome, Trent.
Afternoon.
The annual ceremony of carryovers. The annual ceremony of carryovers continues.
We promise. Yeah.
I know. I see you all every month.
Yeah. So, Trent, for the benefit of those watching from home, do you want to just give a brief overview of what
Sure.
the budget review entails?
Obviously, Council only adopted its 2021 budget a few weeks ago, but as tends to be the case, a lot of projects and programs don't always fall within the timings of a financial year of 1 July to 30th June. So at the end of each financial year, we review all the operational and capital projects that are underway, and we put forward a submission for carryover of those operational capital projects, in particular where the capital project is underway or there's a contractual commitment to undertake those works or its essential works. So what you find in front of you here is a summary of those works and the implications it has on our 2021 budget.
Can I ask a question, Trent?
Sure.
Again, this is for the benefit of the people listening today. Can you give us an update regarding the budget community engagement platform that we're delivering to the community as promised earlier this year?
That's not actually part of the budget review process.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I'm happy to give you some information on that. So we're just working through that at the moment in terms of getting questions sorted out, people with the unders and overs component,
Okay.
and also asking them for feedback on how they'd like to see a community engagement process work. I imagine that will be out in 2 or 3 weeks, maybe.
Fantastic. So we promised
before
October that's going to be delivered.
Now.
That's what, yeah, excellent.
I've got a question, and again, I think it's more for the benefit of people from home, so you'll know the answer to this.
Sure.
Just in regard, and I think it will give some comfort to those watching, in regard to our cash reserves, we spoke about this before the rates came out, and if they were worse than, if it really does get worse than we think, we still have a good amount of money in cash reserves that we can draw upon if necessary, that we haven't had to dip into along the way for this.
Sure. So obviously as part of this BR process, we do evaluate the cash again, following the extensive work we did during the budget process to ensure that we retained a sustainable level of cash balance for council. Now, all the works that come through the budget review process for BR1 for carryover, they're works that are already committed. So we had already allowed for those in our original cash forecast. So there's nothing in here that will unduly or negatively affect the cash balances that we forecast to keep NOOSA Council sustainable. And actually a lot of them are externally funded, the capital ones in particular, through some new emergent grants that came through from the feds and state government. So no, the outcomes of the BR1 won't negatively affect council's cash balances.
Joe?
Yeah, just I'll do the other Dorothy Dixon. We've already talked about carryovers, but in this we talk about emergent items, and there's a significant amount of emergent items, $3,225,000 worth listed here. Can you explain where those emergent works have arisen from and how we funded them?
Sure. So we adopted our base budget in the first week in July, and subsequent to us finalising the budget process, there was announced an additional grant for what's called the Unite and Recover grant program, $2 million, which doesn't require any co-funding from council. It's $2 million that we can spend on a range of agreed capital works by 30th June. So that's come in as an emergent work, so that increases our capital program by $2 million. There's another $600,000 for Beckman's Road design works, which again is fully funded through grants. So, and the others are all as well other minor grant applications, as well as an extra $310,000 for the netball courts upgrade.
Yeah.
Probably not in your sphere to explain that one, but with regard to the $600,000, Beckman's Road we know is a state road and a state responsibility. Mr. CEO, you might like to explain why we've got $600,000 towards the design of a state road.
It is the state's obligation to design and build the upgrade to Beckman's Road under the de-mining agreement, which was signed many years ago. They have been happy to effectively subcontract the design of that to council, and this what we're talking about here is the design of the Croy Noosa Road intersection with Beckman's Road, that roundabout an area there. And so they are going to pay us to undertake that design work for them, $600,000.
That's just for the roundabout area, not the entire road, just for the roundabout. That's right. Just clarifying that, so that people understand the scale and cost of Beckman's Road upgrade.
There is a different alignment in terms of where that intersection would be, services, issues around tenure and so on. So the fair bit of work actually gets that design done, detailed design done.
So we can bank the bike pass, okay.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I was just going to ask, have we got the capability and manpower to deliver on all these shovel-ready projects that we've received state and federal funding for? I understand that, you know, time is of the essence and these projects have got to be delivered by a certain time.
Oh, that's a good question. I certainly hope so is the answer.
We'll be doing everything we can to make sure.
Absolutely, and you know, I've spoken to the infrastructure team and they assured me that that is the case. But you know, there's a lot of, the thing about delivering projects is that it's not just the value, it's the number of projects. A lot of small projects is actually more difficult to deliver than one big project. But the good thing is that most of these projects are genuinely shovel ready, you know, designs are in place, or it's, to be blunt, you know, quasi-maintenance type work, fixing up electrical boards, or organising roof repairs and things like that. So they're a bit simpler in terms of not having to go through a major tender process. It's often panels and things like that can go off and do it. I've also made it pretty clear to the team that we need to deliver these, and part of that reason is that if we want to be able to get into future funding for grants, we've got to be able to prove to the state government we can deliver it. So otherwise, if we don't deliver it, we go back next year and say, well, we think that you should, you know, give us more money, and they're going to go, well, why would we do that? Because we haven't delivered it.
And someone else has missed out on that opportunity.
Correct. Yeah, so there's a fair bit of pressure on the team to be able to deliver those 43 projects as a mere formula.
And with regards to that funding, CEO, I mean, those emergent works, you talk about our capacity to deliver, but the idea of that economic stimulus is to deliver, you know, to provide opportunities within the community. I mean, those works are being subcontracted and
correct. And one of the, we actually framed our program on that in a deliberate way. The easiest way for council to have done it would have been actually to have a one project for the whole amount. It would have been easier to manage. You just got to deliver one and you can deal with it. But that would have been a $2 million project, big tender, and potentially out of town contractor wins it at that scale. Whereas having a lot of smaller contracts means that it's more likely to be local contractors, or mum and dad type businesses who'll do a $50,000 job here or a $20,000 job there, or in some cases an $8,000 fence. More time consuming for us to manage those projects, but more effective at getting that funding onto the ground locally and quicker.
It seems that there's a rush to get it done in a way because you don't know what the weather's going to throw at us, and so I would suspect that there is some incentives to get going now as soon as you possibly can, up till Christmas even. Before, you know, we don't really know what's going to happen.
We've actually already completed one or two.
Yeah, well,
so
okay,
the pressure's on,
yeah.
And every month through the capital work executive, which is like the management level, go through these projects.
We're drilling it down.
Are there any things that are stopping us delivering these? We need to get these over the line.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
You know,
No, you're right.
Seconded, Councillor Jerusalem.
I only want to highlight one sentence, and that sentence is capital grant revenue has increased by 4.1 million. And the revised capital expenditure program has increased by 8.2 million to $35.3 million. That is a record capital expenditure for this shire in its history. It is, as the Chief Executive Officer has just pointed out, it is the most sound local economic development initiative we can take in the current environment. When the free market goes into recession, public expenditure needs to go up as much as we can afford to drive more jobs in our local community, and we've just heard the explanation how we've tried to do that. I think that's really important. It is ambitious, but it is what is needed, and it is, I think Councillor Wegner mentioned some of the things he went to stand in front of the community to go as a council. One of the ones I said was exactly that we would try and bring forward future capital works, and we're very fortunate that we've been in the right position with state and federal funding, that's allowed us still to only have a fairly modest budget deficit. It's slightly increased as a result of the budget review, but it's still quite modest in the current conditions. I'd far prefer that and trying to get as many dollars as possible circulating in the local economy.
Yes. Any other councillors will speak to the motion? The motion, those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Now, item 7, financial performance report. Trent, page 19 with the same agenda.
So far, so good.
Looking good, looking healthy.
Early stage of the financial year, obviously. So
I've got a couple of questions, and
Sure.
again, this is more for the people at home. We were worried about rates. We made a conscious effort not to increase our rates. Can you tell me how the rates are coming in? What they're looking like? What's the trend? Are people paying them? Are they? Have we projected? How are our projections? So, like, are we going better than we thought, or worse than we thought, or are we on par to what we expected?
sure. Okay. Yeah. There's the two components there. Obviously, in terms of what we forecast our revenue would be for the year, which is itemised. And we can get to that. I think that's on page 20. It is rates and levies. Our revenue is generally in line with what we forecast. So our estimates were on par. So the total revenue is in line with expectations. No budget risk there. The other side of the coin is actually whether the cash comes in. So we've been tracking the cash so far for the first 3 weeks of rates issue. Now, obviously, we've got a longer discount period this time with what we adopted in the rates to support the community to pay. But we're still seeing that the actual cash coming in the door is pretty much on par at 3 weeks than it was this time last year. So we're not seeing any decline. Obviously, that may just be simply at this stage indicative of those that can pay are paying early. So we will see the back end of that in about 5 weeks' time to know for sure. Hopefully by the next council meeting we should know. But at this stage, it's comforting to know that the affordability to pay is still there and the rates are still coming in.
So we've gone from 30 days to pay to 60 days.
Correct.
Is that, yep, okay. Thank you.
Questions, councillors? Very good.
I'll move it.
Move Councillor Stewart.
I'll second it.
Seconded Councillor Lawrenson. Councillors wish to speak to the motion. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, Trent. Thank you. Now we're up to, of course, we have a request for another adjournment.
Comfort stop.
Comfort stop. It is a very long. Yes, please. Yeah. All right, meeting open again, and welcome back everybody. We're now at item 8, which is the Fire Management Actions Update on page 31 of the General Committee agenda. We welcome to the table Craig Doolan and Anthony Dow. Well, gentlemen, thank you. Mayor Stewart, you have a question?
Craig, I think we spoke about this over email this week. It is my understanding now that the 2015 Bushfire Management Plan is currently on our website.
It is, that's correct.
Thank you for putting that up.
No problem at all.
And I've been told by, so this is more for people at home too and other councillors, that told by yourself that it's in the process of being reviewed with a view to bringing it to council in the next few months and looking at and forming fire management for 2021 and beyond.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So we've been operating via our 2015 plan for some time. So it's been guiding our fire management actions for some years. So we've been in the process of reviewing this one for the better part of 12 months, but obviously we're really stepping up now, particularly with community concern moving into this season. And that new fire management plan will have more detail than the previous one did, that hopefully reflects the increased level of interest and making it a lot clearer on what our fire break standards are, where and how they're applied, and also how we prioritise our burn program.
And have we been working in conjunction with any other agencies in regard to that plan?
The plan I'm referring to is specifically around how we manage council bushland reserves. So while we certainly work with QFES around standards related to fire access trails and fuel reduction zones, it's primarily around council bushland and the way we manage our land. So the way we work with other agencies like Queensland Parks and Wildlife, we have other forums for that. So we work with them in other ways.
Right. I know that we've increased our cool fire burns from, was it 3 or 4 to 7?
That's correct.
Yep. Yeah. How are we? I know we've had rain. Where are we in regards to the cool fire burns?
Well, our intent is to get 7 done this financial year. So we completed the first in early May. We've had another one scheduled which has been cancelled that we're still hoping to get done this month. And
which one's that, correct?
That's the landfill site. So it's been scheduled twice, I believe, and both times it's not been able to be undertaken, but we've still got contractors going out there every few days basically checking the site to check that it's available, and we may get a third one in. Our initial third likely site for the burn was the Woolworry Creek area down Marindle Street. That's unlikely given how narrow our windows get in now. It's a very complicated burn, so we've identified a few other burns that we can bring forward if we get suitable weather.
Okay, great. And we've increased fire trails for about 6 kilometres or more?
We have, as well as our ongoing maintenance of about over 60 kilometres of fire trails. We've also looked at some significant new ones and fuel reduction zones as well, particularly around Heritage Park, which is one of the actions from the Parklands Management Plan from some years ago, and down at Peregian Beach as well.
Great. And are they on track?
They are, yep. They're on track. They're being contracted out as we speak. The community letters will probably go out in the next couple of weeks.
Terrific.
There'll be a lot of interest in the community, those two sites. A lot of people live there and some people have different points of view, but they will certainly occur.
Right, thank you.
Well, an example of how fickle the situation is, the planned burn for Daintree Estate today it's now been cancelled. So.
Have we had many requests from residents to remove vegetation on council land, Craig?
If you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, the answer would have been no, but yes, it's moving up very quickly. So that's our biggest challenge, quite frankly, is dealing with the community requests and community's perception of risk around bushfire. And the biggest challenges my team will face over the next month or two will be making decisions on areas where people are wanting vegetation removed. We'll certainly try and meet the community as much as we can. We're not going to go in and do wholesale vegetation removal where all the mapping says that it's not a really high risk area. But at the same time, if the small things we can do to keep the community comfortable without actually providing environmental harm, then we'll try and meet the community where we can.
Fantastic.
The state regulations have changed concerning burning around people's property and what they can chop down in order to maintain their safety. How is that going? Are people doing that? Do they know about the regulations? And would this be something that would go into the double-page spread that NOOSA Council puts into the paper once a month? Just information on that level.
It could do. The state regulations around clearing for fire management changed last December quite quickly. They allow significantly more clearing than was previously able. It's not something that's probably really broadly known. It's not something we as a council promote or to advertise. It certainly presents some challenges to us as far as people being able to clear vegetation. It's certainly true that most of the contractors out there doing this sort of work are certainly very well aware of it though, and are promoting it within the local community where it's relevant.
And it's based on, it's not an objective sort of test from my understanding of that regulation. If you have a concern or a fear that you may be impacted by a fire, then you can make the clearing. Is that right, Craig?
You can. Look, I'm probably not as good as Connor Neville, who's about the only staff member I don't have here today related to fire.
Kerry, you can help me with that one?
answer.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember the wording, but
Yeah,
I remember when
certainly.
I read it, it was quite subjective.
There are some measurements in the regulation around what can be cleared. It's up to 20 metres or 1.5 times the height of the trees is the maximum. But the wording in the regulation is about what's necessary.
Okay.
So it's not just if you feel fear, you've actually got to show that it is necessary. So our advice to people is they should obtain some advice from a fire expert to work out what's necessary for their property, how they can best manage it.
And this is just what they can do on their property, not on surrounding reserves.
Certainly they can't go on to surrounding reserves,
On the question of reserves, your report notes that NOOSA Council is responsible for 4% of the land mass, that's the area covered by the bushland reserves.
It's actually about 3.6 to 3.7. It changes quite quickly, so I thought it's safer to say under 4. So basically under 4% of the land in NOOSA is council managed area with bushland on it. So,
how much would be
a range
QPWS?
of methods for mitigating fire risk. You just run through them, Craig, and perhaps explain a bit about when you would apply each of those. Fuel reduction, fire access trails, etc.
Yeah, I mean, fire access trails are the ones that most people are most familiar with, commonly known as fire breaks. We prefer not to use the terminology fire break because it's not now, nor has it ever been the intent for them to provide a physical break between fire. And we saw that in some of our fires last year. We had fires spotting 500, 800, even a kilometre ahead. You would need a kilometre break to get a true break in those areas. They're primarily designed to get vehicle access in to protect home and property. So there's a lot of examples around the Shire where, depending on the size of the vehicle and the access they've got, it depends on how wide the trail is to allow fire services to get in. We have a controlled burn program where we go in and do fuel reduction burns through the bushland areas. There's all sorts of challenges with controlled burning, not only in community concerns over burning, but just the sheer weather, the real challenges in getting it done. And fuel reduction zones are mostly used where those other two can't be used very successfully. There's a whole range of reasons where it may not be safe or may not be physically possible to put a fire access trail in. For example, a coastal dune with a steep slope is not a spot where you can go in and provide a 5 metre break or something like that because it would just erode away. So in those areas we can go through and actually reduce understory vegetation, usually perhaps up to 10 metres, possibly 15 depending on the risk. So they're our three main mechanisms that we use, and they're usually based on the topography of the site and the actual risk to the site itself.
Craig, you mentioned less than 4% council control. Do we know how much QPWS control?
It's in the low to mid 20s. Michael, do you know? I think it's about 22% off the top of my head.
That's 22.35.
There you go. Thank you, Councillor.
22.35
is my expert advice.
In total, somewhere around about 25% of
it is,
that we cover.
It's in the low 20s. I've seen the figure. I can't recall exactly what it is, though, Joe. And there's also significant bushland on private land as well. We work really closely with QPWS. Our officers meet with their officers from both regions, usually about February or March each year. We sit around a table for a few hours and go through every possible burn that both parties might be able to do, how we can combine them, where we can share some resources, and then we come together as part of the broader area fire management group, which also has things like Department of Transport and Main Roads, Natural Resources, SEQ Water, so other land managers, but not with quite the stake that QPWS have.
Anthony, Craig's doing all the talking. Can't let him get away without asking you a question. How's all the technological advancements and future solutions looking at present?
Thanks, Joe. You'll get a full report from the hub in next month's round, but Fire Tech Connect is going very well. So we've got about $250,000. So just to explain that budget, we got initial 100,000 from the feds for. That was from the innovation and the industry fund. And that really primarily is around what we're doing right now, which is an acceleration program. So the accelerator program is taking local technology companies and national and international, and trying to bring them to market and bring them into effect quicker than they would normally be able to do. So we help them commercialize quicker, pilot quicker, access capital quicker. So that's kind of where the first 100's gone. So that's federal funding. There's another 50,000, which is a state grant, which is mainly around marketing and actually tourism related, and that was another bushfire response. And then we've been successful. Probably about 3-4 weeks ago, we got the another 100,000, and with the 27, you've heard 127 is the number. So that's 100,000 from federal bushfire recovery grant. The 27 referred to actually that's because it's for an international event. There's actually some ticketing and some membership and sponsorship money coming in. So that's the other 27. So that adds up to over 250, 270,000. So really the outcomes of that are really for NOOSA to become really the headquarters for fire technology,
digital technology,
excellence,
Wow.
digital fire technology. Obviously we're looking to focus on the local community first in its application, and we are looking pilot an opportunity. So it's great that we're now working with Craig and James. So we've got disaster response recovery coordination and natural areas and environmental services. So we're now, I think, starting to go across council in this activity, but it's kind of just the start. Right now, we've got as it says in the report, we've got a world-class mentoring panel working with 14 high-tech businesses. So about 4 or 5 are local, but obviously the other part of this is investment attraction. So it's actually looking at attracting more talent here, the best research here. We are partnering with CSIRO as well in this, so it's kind of evolving, but that's where it's at. But we'll give you some more in-depth kind of update on the program in the September's year-end digital hub report.
Good to see CSIRO with a finger in this as well.
Yeah.
Some of this technology involves early detection of fires. Is it satellite technology they use? Anthony, can you talk a bit about the sort of technologies involved?
Yeah, so one of the tenants at the hub is Fireball International. So their technology is a mixture of on-ground sensors, cameras, and then satellite. So I'm not an expert, Councillor, but my understanding is that basically this technology identifies the fire within seconds rather than minutes and longer. So it really aids the signalling of the scale, location, and the intensity of fires in remote areas using that combination of satellite and on-ground sensors and cameras. So it does involve an investment in the actual infrastructure, cameras, sensors. The satellites are already up there doing their thing, so the software integrates that whole communication to then pass to the responders as accurately and as quickly as possible.
So we're about a month away from time last year when Bridging was hit by fires. Is there any opportunity for this sort of technology to be operative by start of the fire season?
You know, we are in conversations, I guess, around that, and state government are looking to support us. So there is the opportunity for NOOSA to be involved in a rollout of that pilot. So I think that in the next few weeks we'll be putting that proposition on the table.
Does it need to be funded by us? Is it a financial decision that we'll be making to get to be a part of it, or are we already a part of it?
Separate from the Fire Connect program, so Fireball, I've put a proposal. Well, I guess we're in discussions around a proposal of joint funding, and I guess this links back to a $1.2 million federal funding that Council adopted back in July now, I think, June, July. So, Council, I think the proposition is that it's about $200,000 to $300,000 per year to roll out that kind of sensor and technology. So yes, there would be a funding ask, but I believe that there would be a three-way kind of contribution to that: state, local, and private.
Would it involve councils to our north and south as well? To take a regional approach to fire management?
Yeah, there certainly has been discussions with Sunshine Coast Council on that. Don't think we've engaged GIBBY yet, but Yeah, ideally it would be an LGAQ. I think eventually we would look at how you actually engage the whole state in that pilot.
I'm sure it was a sensor on the rattler.
This
Yeah.
is
That's a
viable
fire
technology's
sale.
being used in California, isn't it? The fires there.
Yeah, so the question is, yeah, so the this particular, I guess, local technology has already partnered with Cal Fire, which is Californian Fire. So that Fireball International at the hub, I think they started with about 5 or 6. They're already up to, I think, 15 or 16 between here, California, and Vancouver. So pretty exciting developments.
Who would have thought we would have had an astrophysicist working on fire management in Bridget?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Doesn't surprise me. So you're Bridget. Come to expect.
Conflict of interest.
Can I ask Craig a question?
Yeah.
Craig, I should ask this before I give you a heads up. So we go into fire season. Is anything keeping you awake at night in terms of our preparedness, particularly in the land that we control?
Not from our preparedness. What keeps me awake at night, to be honest, is the impact on my staff of the community expectations around fire. To be honest, that's where it is. I mean, a lot of the community focuses on the bushland at the house and the national park. The unfortunate thing is, if we get the same weather as we had last year and people go around lighting fires, we will have bushfires again. Yep. Nothing we or anyone can do to stop that, and that's why I think it's really important our messaging keeps going out to the community that we will do what we can, but the community needs to fix up your yard, clean up your roofs, make sure your yard's in good shape. We had feedback from some of the residents at NOOSA Banks who have been somewhat critical in council in some areas with our fire response, that they were told that the only reason they survived fire last year was because they maintained their yards so well. And I said that's exactly right. They did a fantastic job maintaining their yards, and they have that within their realm of control. So I'd suggest that for all the community. It's a really key message.
The difference in expectation between what's a fire break and fire access.
It is, yeah.
That's interesting. You point that out. I mean, the result of fires being man-made, and the opportunities to turn around and heed the warnings. And when they say don't use equipment that could, spark a fire, such as grinders and welders and that we actually take heed of that and don't use that equipment, because that's exactly what started one of the fires last year.
So, question in regard to the community education. The last time we had a conversation about this, I highlighted the initiatives of the QFS equivalent in Tasmania, rolling out a series of extension officers. Have we had any more forward movement from Queensland Fire Services as a more proactive community education preparing for the fire season? I think
I'll pass that one on to either James or Alison.
So we're
you'll need to
come to the table, mate.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, we're meeting with Queensland Fire and Emergency Services next week to look at our high-risk areas, and they're going to be looking at a targeted campaign to address those communities and allay their fears, and also work with them around resilience. So it's a meeting for next week.
Ideal time to roll out a campaign when the community is vigilant and after last year's.
That's right.
So QFS will be communicating fire readiness messages, for example.
That's right. Yeah, they've already released their program and their communication messages for this year. They were released last week, and so they've got a campaign that they're going to go out with, and we'll be supporting that.
Does it involve leaflet drops door to door? Or
generally, they
is
will
it an
target.
online campaign?
It's online. Well, both. They have online campaigns. They also have materials that they distribute as well. So.
Will we be sharing that on our council page?
Yeah, definitely. We do link from our disaster dashboard as well to the Rural Fire Brigade, and then that information is available there.
The SES facilitates that with a message about storm season and all of that approaching as well, and we get magnets and stickers and messaging that goes out in that regard as well. So.
Yeah, that's right. We met with Get Ready last week, and they'll be releasing their campaign early September, but then for Get Ready Week in October, and we'll be part of that.
All good. I'll move it.
Move Councillor Jurcevic, second Councillor Stewart. Joe, you wish to speak to the motion?
I think all the questions and the information that I wanted to extract have been done. I said compliment the guys on the efforts that they've done since the fires, and the work that we're doing to advance technology in the region to try and manage this situation as we go forward.
Councillor Lawson.
I'd just like to just probably reinforce our social responsibility to make sure that we're vigilant. And I also want to sort of commend local law officers. I've been drawn to a couple of incidences at NOOSA Woods and Perugian Beach, where just youth have been lighting fires, and between our police, who I can't speak highly enough of, and local law officers, they're on choice. I think we all understand what could happen. So again, just love to reinforce our social and community responsibility.
I'd like to thank Craig and his team. We have significantly increased our fire management practices. We've increased our cool fire burns from 4 to 7. We've increased our access trails by about an extra 6 kilometres. And similarly, in the 2021 budget, we have almost doubled our budget on fire trail building and maintenance. And there's been a 71% increase in budget for controlled burns on council land. I'd like to acknowledge and thank Craig and his team, as fire mitigation and fire management is incredibly emotive topic in our community based on the experiences this community went through in regard to last year's fire season, and it's terrific to see these increased resources and additional measures being put into practice. And I'd also like to commend staff on the and very supportive initiative of the Get Ready Week in October, and also the great initiative that our community development team is working with our Council Disaster Management Officer James and our local QFES officer with community groups such as Lake Tharrabar Residents Association on their disaster management plans, because it's very important that people do take responsibility for their own works. I think that the Fire Tech program, the $270,000 that we've received in funding, is absolutely terrific, and I think we will be a world first, and it's a brilliant way to ensure that NOOSA Council gets access to the most advanced innovative technologies available to assist in fire prevention and fire management. It's exciting that James and the disaster management team will be working closely with the Hub's Fire Tech Connect team program to trial those promising mitigation technologies, and it's wonderful to see a cross-council collaborative approach. This, along with increased fire mitigation and increased burns and breaks, won't prevent fires. As you said, Craig, we can't prevent it, but we can certainly mitigate our losses and help protect the community as best we can. So I thank you and all the staff for this cross-collaboration and working together.
While we're here, I'd just like to ask the staff, that we're talking about a commemorative event planned in September at Perugian. Could you just perhaps give us, for the benefit of people listening, why we're doing that and what it involves, and who it involves, what will happen on the day?
Cheryl Patterson.
Come up close, Cheryl. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're doing 3 commemorative events, the first one being at Perugian Beach Community House, so that's on the 12th of September, and it involves QFES and a component of education, community education around fires and also all hazards, James. So there'll be QFES there, fire engines. It's there's a exhibition for the local artist who's taking pictures of the regeneration, so that's happening. Koroiba and North Shore, they're happening in November. Yeah, so it's about getting community together, discuss recovery in their terms, how they feel about that, an opportunity to connect.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Cheryl's just been appointed as the Community Recovery Officer in the team through the category C funding.
No, congratulations.
Working on resilience as well.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Right.
So during the course of the conversation, about social responsibility and preparedness, we're looking at it from a landowner perspective and saying we're working QFS, and the one that's come to my mind is that quite frequently ignition is in line with school holidays. And I actually think that maybe even before Thursday, or certainly a conversation needs to be had about, can we develop some champions within our youth, or a program that relates to youth that actually gets the consequences of foolhardiness really understood in that demographic. Now it's not a new problem, but it is one that perhaps what might have not been such a significant hazard to life, limb and property in the past will be. That it could be, and I just think that maybe that is the local government opportunity for us to play a role of bringing together a response to actually engage the youth and our high school students about what a responsible approach to this is, and just making sure that people understand that it might seem funny or a bit of fun just to throw a match or have a fire in the wrong time or whatever, but what those consequences are and try and build something. I just think it's something we should think about.
QFIS to deliver a community education program, a schools education program specifically. I mean, Cheryl or James maybe talk more specifically about the elements of that.
Yeah.
Tag team.
So we have been engaging with Dahlia from Queensland.
The Environmental Education Hub?
Yes, yeah, on a schools program for high schools. She actually did a pilot at Good Shepherd, which went really, really well. And with that, in fact, like you were saying in regards to the education, the peer stuff around lighting fires and the damage that can actually be done. James got a bit more information.
Yeah, so she pretty much described the project to us. We got some really good output from the program. It was a really engaging program, and actually the students that came out of it, they had some really great projects. They were very engaged by it. It was something that we thought was quite a positive thing, and we're just currently looking at what processes we could go through at the moment to look at further engagement around that and how that could be sort of disseminated around the rest of the region as well through the schools. But it was year 9.
Year 9, that target group, around 14 to 15-year-olds. And also looking at possible funding to roll that out through the schools in this region. Yeah, but the outcomes from the first pilot were really, really well received. And it is part of the curriculum for grade 5, Get Ready so there's also a little bit of the education there in grade 5. However, not so much the target group in regards to dangerous
so specifically behaviour. Around fire, and this would be the target audience to really...
Yeah, and that was for other councils. That pilot project in Environment Led Hub was what led to the request for a junior council, and that build leadership. And that's, I suppose, what we're trying to do. That old folkies can go and talk to a parade and people go to sleep, but if their peers are trying to engage them in a conversation, that'd probably be more effective.
What Dolly is doing is absolutely amazing. I've heard so many glowing reports from her. But also, when you talk about your peers doing it, the Perigian Hub, I went down there. There's a 12-year-old kid giving a class on robotics at one time, and that is your peers, talking with each other. That just works so well.
Yeah. And just in regards to the Youth Council, they are putting a funding application in to start the Youth Council in this region. So we hope then we can put disaster preparedness.
Oh, Ray Kelly will be thrilled.
Yeah. And it could be something even just simpler like Jake, what he's doing in our waterways at NOOSA River, where you get a local law officer that actually just every now and then randomly walks through the woods and talks, with just talks at the same level as the children and engages with the kids. Jake, the kids love Jake. And I can't see why kids that hang out in gathers in Noosa Woods and Perigian can't like our local law officers. I think that relationship needs to be nurtured.
Yeah, and I think the children are going to develop their own how to reach other children as well, and so that peer model and how to connect with the youth that aren't engaged. So they are going to work on that as well. Yeah, and it's led by them, like what they want to learn about, I guess, and what's a danger to them. That was what the theme was, but hopefully we can get that off the ground soon. I'd like to start that next term.
Well, I was them to speak out, well and good.
Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Look, I'll speak. Fire management plans are always important. Thanks for your work in that space, Craig. I was one of many last September who saw for the first time ever saw houses, fences, backyards, cars, bushland at Perigian on fire for the first time. And there are a lot of shocked faces pouring into the J at the evacuation centre, and they'll be watching with interest about what Noosa Council is doing in terms of managing its fire risk in the lead up to this season, hoping that we've learned the lessons and improving on practices, which all the indications are that you are, and also how the council is working with all the other land holders such as QPWS and Department of Environment and Resource Management to manage their land holdings as well. I think we can be looking at your caveat that no matter what you do, if someone's going to start be lighting matches in the bush, if this weather conditions are similar to what they were last year, there's going to be fires. but I think they can be well assured that the NOOSA Council is doing all it can to manage its risk. I think that's all I have to say about it, but in the minds of people who've been through that, this is the most important thing. Like if they're physically under threat and their property is under threat of burning, nothing else the council does, no matter how ambitious or worthy matters, this is the most important thing. And I commend the work you've done in this regard. Thank you. Any other councillors to speak to the motion? The motion, those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thanks, Christy. Thank you, mate. We now have a confidential matter that requires closing the meeting to the public.
I'll move the motion that we go into confidential session.
Move Councillor Juricic, seconded Councillor Lawrenson. Do I need to read that?
I think we should, yeah.
Okay, I'll read it. The motion is that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to section 275(1)(f) and G of the Local Government Regulation 212 for the purpose of discussing legal advice relating to an appeal in the Planning and Environment Court, so that Council's legal position is protected in relation to General Committee Agenda Item 9 RAL 17/0504 Planning and Environment Court Appeal number D61 of 218, refusal of application to reconfigure a lot 1 into 4 lots at 135 Lake Wyver Drive, NOOSAVILLE. All those in favour? That's carried. Let us know, Kathy.
Well, good, we're back in open.
Okay, welcome back everyone, back in open session. We have a motion before us, councillors. Someone care to move that? Councillor Wegener, seconded Councillor Stewart. Any councillors wish to speak to the motion? Okay, we'll put the motion. All in favour? Councillor Stewart, Councillor Wegener, Councillor Juricevic, Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Wilkie. And against? Councillor Stockwell. Councillors, that's the end of the agenda, the end of the meeting. I declare the meeting closed and thank you all for your patience.